Over 20 years ago, Alex Jones created the media platform called InfoWars, and in the decades since, it's grown into a truly remarkable institution with over 200 radio affiliates, tens of millions of unique website visitors monthly, and a 24/7 live news TV channel broadcasting from state-of-the-art studios in Austin, Texas. InfoWars has become the most trusted independent news source in the country, dedicated to delivering breaking news, live coverage of special events, and exclusive reports you won't find anywhere else. While the old guard media struggles to maintain supremacy in a landscape rocked by innovation and technology, InfoWars has been at the forefront of the information revolution. From 8 million radio listeners, over 2 million YouTube subscribers, or the billions of views of our online content, InfoWars proves dominant in every facet of media we enter. For the hardest-hitting reports, uncompromising analysis, for high-profile interviews and bombshell revelations, accept no substitutes. Demand truth. Demand InfoWars. InfoWars. Tomorrow's news today.
Welcome on this Friday, August the 3rd, 2018. I'm David Knight, your host today. Alex is going to be joining us in the next segment. He's got a couple reports he wants to talk about. One of the things that he wants to talk about is Rob Reiner saying he's so thankful that InfoWars is being attacked. Well, you know, we need to take a look at what is going on in this country. Are we going to have a First Amendment, or are we going to have a double standard? Because that's what we're increasingly seeing. I think that all reflects in what we've seen the last couple of days, the back and forth between Jim Acosta, Sarah Sanders, press secretary. We're going to play that for you. Sarah Sanders really took him down a notch. And what is really amazing is the arrogance of Jim Acosta. He is the poster child for CNN arrogance. Because as you watch these press conferences, he is talking over the other members of the press there. The only voice that matters, of course, is Jim Acosta's, just like the only voice that matters is CNN, if you believe them. And he wants to take her to task because President Trump has criticized fake news. And he wants to say, well, you have to say that the media, because he thinks that they are the media. You know, they can never be hateful, just like we see with this lady who is hired by the New York Times. No matter what they say, no matter how viciously racist they are, they can never be hateful. These hateful eight. There's probably about 8 different media companies, the big newspapers, the big networks that are out there. Nothing that they do can ever be racist or hateful. But if you are a certain person group, if you belong to a certain race or a certain political persuasion, then everything that you say is hateful. As it comes out of your mouth, it will be construed to be hateful. It will be censored. And, of course, that's the world that Jim Acosta lives in. And so he demands that Sarah Sanders bow down to him and declare how much she loves the media, which to him is CNN. He talks over Sarah Sanders. He talks over the other people, the other members of the press. They want to be the only media that you hear. They don't want you to be able to hear anything else, see anything else, or share anything else. So we're going to be talking about that today. We're also going to be talking about some updates on the cardinal sins of pedophiles and the abuse of nuns in the Catholic Church. But we're going to take this a little bit broader. Yesterday, I had an individual who had his children taken away from him by Child Protective Services. That's the one that nobody wants to talk about. Everybody is eager to talk about the Catholic Church because the left doesn't like religion. They'd like to give any religion, especially Christianity, a black eye. And when they do something wrong, they are quick to speak out about it. We're going to talk about an individual who joined me yesterday. When they took away his child and he had to fight them for 22 months, he realized this is a very big national problem that nobody is talking about. They'll talk about the Catholic Church. They'll talk about the cardinal sin. They'll talk about the taking away the children at the border when the parents endanger their children, encouraged by Democrats, breaking the law. And then we have to determine whether or not they really are the parents. Are the parents working with the child traffickers, or have they just turned the kids over to child traffickers? That needs to be determined before we just hand the kids, oh, you say that's your kid? Okay, well, here you go. I don't know anything about you. I don't know anything about this kid. It is a rampant problem at the border. But the left gets all upset about that, but they will never talk about what Child Protective Services does. So we're going to play a little bit of a clip of some statistics that he gave out yesterday, talking about what a massive problem this is, how the media is silent about it, and what happens to the kids that are put in foster care. You'll not believe some of the statistics that he gave me yesterday. And, of course, we're going to have a follow-up on Russia. We have Rand Paul has said that he's going to travel to Russia. We're going to talk about that as well as a back and forth between a neocon, Max Boot, that you've heard many times, but he was taken down by a professor emeritus of Russian studies. So we're going to talk about what's really going on with Russia. And does the future need you? Some amazing stuff with AI. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
There are a lot of things going on in this world, as we all know. And I've been a busy little beaver. So I was up at the office about 7:30 this morning, and David Knight, who's hosting the broadcast today, was already up there researching diligently. And I said, "How you doing, David?" And I was about to open my mouth and tell him the exact same thing he said to me, which shows it's important we talk about it. He said, "Did you see Matt Taibbi, you know, the bastion of journalism, say that we're sending people to the Sandy Hook parents' houses to harass them?" And I said, "It's funny you say that. I was going to say that's in thousands of publications a day to absolutely demonize us beyond all the other hoaxes the media is putting out." And I said, "Since I'm having to deal with that today, will you please cover it? Because Matt Taibbi is defaming me. All these people are. You know, Taibbi has this article. Well, this will get rid of the First Amendment, but Alex is a special case, you know. He's putting people's addresses out." Then you go to the link, and it was other researchers with anomalies about how one of the places they had as an address was a U-Haul place, which I think is fine for people to have privacy. I don't think that's suspicious at all. If somebody's got an address where they're taking mail, they don't want to put their address out. I do the exact same thing. So, but it's like researching all this being sued has really made me upset because I hadn't really covered Sandy Hook in 3-4 years other than responding and saying, "I think it happened. Please stop saying that I say it didn't happen. Please stop claiming I'm doing all this," but then the media and others, the Democrats, the ones actually doing it. So now that I've had top law firms, blue chip law firms, go through everything, and it's like, oh my gosh. You know, the lawyer in the case against me on Wednesday here in Travis County, he gets up and he goes, "Alex Jones is sending people to their houses." And there's a gasp in the room. The Statesman reported. And the judge goes, "Silence, silence." I mean, hell, why don't they just say that I killed everybody? I mean, because that's about where they're going in the media. I mean, I did not kill the Sandy Hook children. I did not hurt the Loch Ness Monster. I did not. I mean, all of this is just next level insanity. And now you got Rob Reiner, meathead, who said we're in a revolution, we're in a civil war, we're going to, you know, overthrow all these people. He said that months ago, so, and a bunch of them said it. So I said, oh, look at the Democrats. They're saying all this, they're doing all this. They think it's a civil war, they're calling for uprisings, full-page ads. And then they go, Jones is insane. He says July 4th is the uprising, and there'll be a giant shooting war with the North against the South. But they don't show you what I actually said. Again, I said they see July 4th as a demarcation line of when they're launching their revolution, which they said. I was quoting them. There's another article today. We'll play some of that video here in a moment, where Rob Reiner is up there saying we're in a revolution or we're in a civil war and blah, blah, blah. And the media's coming up for Trump. Total lie, total hoax. But being honest about the fact that he sees this as the last battle of the Civil War, confirming everything I've said. And that's why they hate us, is because we're accurate. It's not because we're inaccurate. So Infowars.com, Newswars.com. They're trying to shut us down. Please buy the products. They're the best supplements, the best water filtration, the best air filtration out there for the price. I mean, you can buy $1,000 air filters that are better than Alexa Pure Breeze, but it's as good as $600 units. And it's $150 on sale right now. Folks, that's insane. It should be $300. Okay? Most of those units have 2, 3, 4 times markup. This doesn't have, at this sale, even 50% markup. Do you understand what that means? You cannot get a better deal. Infowarsstore.com, Infowarslife.com. Get in there, buy the product, sign up for auto ship so you don't forget to support us every month. I know you want to support us. I love you. I appreciate you. We're going to keep fighting to the end. We're winning. I may go down, but the victory for liberty is going to happen. One way or the other, just pray for us. Infowars.com, newswars.com. But it's just out freaking outrageous that they lie like this, and they do it with impunity. So I will tell Taibbi, and I'll tell others. I've got law firms looking at it right now, and we're sending out the letters for people to retract. I'm publicly telling Taibbi, you're a journalistic fraud, saying that I said that, and you linked to somebody else, and then that links to something about a U-Haul truck place. Good God, man. I do not want to have to sue you. I don't have to sue any of you people, but you're together in journalistic fraud, all engaging in it together, thinking you'll all be protected like a school of sardines or something. If you all, engage in fraud, you'll be protected because you do it in a group. That's called tyranny. And so, look, God knows the truth. My listeners know the truth. Anybody that's paying attention knows the truth. So at the end of the day, I'm just very excited that I have all the scum of the earth lying about me and attacking me. But at a certain point, I've got to have some cases back at you. And I'm suing 5 people right now that sued me. So we're not playing games. Oh, by the way, I waived the fees in Connecticut, and I waived the fees in Texas, which no one has ever done that they know of, because in the Connecticut and in Texas, it's law that if you sue somebody for defamation and that's proven to be a fraud, that they have to pay. That's just like in England has those laws. That's the law. No one, my lawyers say, has ever waived it. I waive it, so they're not going to give me, that high road coup. So they all say that I did not waive the fees. They all say that I'm suing the families, the opposite of reality, except Jonathan Tillove, of the Austin American Statesman. He got it half-ass right and said, well, it's funny. Jones isn't waiving fees here if they lose, the other side, but he did in Connecticut. So, literally, I spent hours last night looking at this. One place got it halfway right, and they couldn't even get it. And look, to Tillove's credit, he hates me, wants to destroy me. It's terrible, but at least I think he actually believes his own BS. In Texas, if you're going to have this law included in the way it all works, the lawyers explain to me, when they sue you, it's basically enacted. You have to enact it for appeals, a bunch of stuff. We had to get to the first hearing to then waive it. But then when we did waive it in front of all the media, they didn't cover it. I mean, so listen, I'm not who they say I am. I love America. I love freedom. They hate us as we're effective, just like they lie about the president all day. Infowars.com. The truth's going to come out. Back to David Knight and the live global transmission, and Mr. Reiner up there talking about the Civil War we're in, that I told you they're pushing, that they said I'm insane, but they're all calling for it. Again, 2 + 2 = whatever they say. I say it equals 4. God bless you all. Infowars.com.
But this is the first time that you have mainstream media essentially divided into 2 halves, so that you have, Fox, Breitbart, Sinclair, and Alex Jones, which has now been taken off of Facebook, thank God, trafficking in another narrative. And so, when shock and awe with these guys, the 4 journalists who got the truth out during the run-up to the war, they were facing headwinds of patriotism, the trauma of 9/11, but they weren't facing the headwinds that real journalists who are working very hard now to get the truth out, which is this cement block, a wall that they cannot penetrate with the truth. And that's the scary part.
Donald Trump ran on this, and it was effective. He said that, the media doesn't represent regular people. Hollywood doesn't represent regular people. We are completely out of touch with regular people. And it worked to his advantage. How as somebody who speaks in the media often, as someone who produces films like Shock and Awe that are journalism films, but then also somebody in Hollywood, how do you push back on that?
You just have to keep pounding away. There's nothing else you can do. I mean, look, doesn't speak to the mainstream media. They're just angry. Their people are angry, and he will feed them whatever they want to keep that anger going. And you see it in the rallies. He actually calls for, you know, this kind of outrage and take it out against the media, take it out against immigrants, take it out against whomever you want. That's what he does. He keeps stirring this up, but you have to stay at it. You have to stay at it. There's no other way.
Bring the fact-checking up to 11.
Well, if you can. I mean, if you can. If you don't break through, we are going to have, we are in it right now. It might be the last stage of a civil war. The last battle is being fought. Hopefully it won't be fought physically, but we are more divided than we ever have been, and we've got a president who is backed up by media. The presidents have always spewed propaganda. Liberals, Democrats, and Republicans, they always have.
Everyone spins.
Yeah, to push a policy, to push a rationale to go to war, but they've never been backed up by essentially incensed state-run media. That's new, and social media, it's all new, and it's very, very scary right now.
Welcome back on this Friday, August the 3rd, 2018. I'm David Knight. You know, as you were listening to Alex Jones, I gave you the top of the news. He was talking about Rob Reiner. I always call him Meathead. He's always Meathead to me. He doesn't play a meathead. He is a meathead. This is the guy who made Archie Bunker look good. They were supposed to have Archie Bunker be the straw man to criticize conservatives back in the day. And because of Rob Reiner, who, and that character, if you look at it, I mean, he is not playing a role. That is Meathead from Archie Bunker. I mean, he sounds exactly the same. When you listen to this guy, he sounds exactly the same as he did then. And he was so unbelievable, so obnoxious that he made Archie Bunker a hero, much to the consternation of Norman Lear and the people who are trying to do just the opposite. And as he's saying, well, the Civil War has started or whatever, you know, and I'm glad that they're taking Alex Jones down, and made an amazing statement about we've never had state-run media before. Well, maybe the meathead ought to go, just Google it, meathead. It still hasn't been taken down yet. There was a CIA operation called Operation Mockingbird, where they would have the chosen 2 or 3 news networks that were allowed to be out there. They made sure that they parroted exactly what the CIA wanted you to hear. They would cover only the stories that the government wanted to have covered, and they would cover it from the angle that the government wanted it to be covered. And that's what we've had for the longest amount of time. Now, what we had for a brief period of time was we had a free internet, and they're shutting that down right now. People were able to communicate with each other. They were able to listen to whatever they wanted to hear. They were able to watch whatever they wanted to watch. They were able to share that information with other people. You can't have that because the meatheads and the Operation Mockingbird CIA people don't want to have that. And so they're putting down a system of censorship right now. Just take a look at how we see the Chinese operating, for example. The Chinese don't want people to use the word Taiwan. Okay, all the airline companies bow down and worship them. Take it off. Google, you want to do business here? You do it on our rules. Google says, yes, we'll do that. You think that's not happening here in America? You don't think that the government is behind all of this? The government is the iron fist. Facebook and Google, the ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, all these people, they are the velvet glove that is put on the iron fist of censorship. As I've said many times on my show in the morning, Real News, I've seen this happen when I was in North Carolina working with third parties. You have to jump through, as a third party or an independent, you have to jump through all these special hoops to get on the ballot. A lot of money, a lot of expense, a lot of hassle. Once you get on the ballot, you don't get in the debates. Why? Because the people who control the debates are the press association. And this happens in all the different states. It's not just North Carolina. I witnessed it firsthand. And so the press itself, who you would think would want to hear all the different opinions. No. Can't have 3 candidates in a debate. Only 2. And we will determine what those questions are going to be and who will be answering those questions. And when you say, wait a minute, this isn't fair, they say, it's private. It's a private organization, just like Facebook and Google and Twitter. They're private. So they're inoculated against all this. And it's not censorship. Not at all. No, they're working hand in glove with the government to make sure that only a couple of voices are heard. I've seen this happen a very long time. This is what's happening with social media right now. As a matter of fact, today, we just got a tweet saying that one of the podcast providers that we have, and we've got for our show, for all the different shows, we've got at least 4. We had Stitcher. They have just dropped all of our shows. We had Spreaker, iTunes, TuneIn. You can still find the stuff there. As a matter of fact, most of the people who listen to my show listen to it via podcast. And so they have now just, across the board, shut us down. So we have to decide whether or not the First Amendment really means anything to us or not. We can't mandate these types of things. It's going to have to come from the people. And you've got more than half of the people right now are begging the government to take away their free speech. Yes, it's going to be their free speech as well, not just our free speech. They're going to take away the freedom of the people who are begging to have everything shut down. Now, some of them, like the meathead, they think, and maybe they will, have the inside track. Maybe they will be part of the insiders. But the vast majority of the people who are the useful idiots of people like Rob Reiner, the Hollywood and political establishment, the media establishment, those people are going to lose their free speech. They're going to have that taken away. You know, free speech was never given to us. Never given to us. We took it. Our ancestors took it. It didn't come down on high in the Bill of Rights. It wasn't given to us by a Supreme Court. It was taken by a jury. You know, the interesting case of Zinger. It was John Peter Zinger in New York. He was up for defamation. Isn't that interesting? That's the way they always come after speech, to try to shut it down. That's what they are doing right now. They're trying to shut us down with charges of defamation and so forth. Anyway, what he said was, hey, look, here's what I said, and here's how it's true. And the judge said, truth is no defense. You know, it doesn't matter that Forbes is out there saying that Alex Jones was the guy that pushed a kid to the ground in a video that we happened to show. I mean, it was a kid who was bullying the guy around, and it was a joke video. It's like finally the adult had enough of it, pushed the kid down, and he just collapses in a heap and cries, and it wasn't a big deal. We're just showing how the kid was a baby about the whole thing. But in that video, Forbes said, look, that was Alex Jones. And so now he's got all these people thinking that he was a person in the video. It's obviously not Alex Jones, but truth is no defense. Now, how do we get free speech? It was when the jury said, no, even though the judge says truth is no defense, we think it is. We think it is. And the jury nullified that judge. The jury nullified that law, just as the jury nullified the laws against the free exercise of religion in England with William Penn. It was a jury that nullified that law. It was clearly against the law for them to meet. They'd passed a law saying you're only going to meet in this particular church, a Church of England. These people were Quakers. They said, you can't meet in that Quaker church anymore. They continued to do it. So they padlocked the door. So then they started holding meetings on the steps of the church. And then they arrested William Penn, who later came to Pennsylvania. And they said, when they took him to trial, the jury said, well, we understand that's the law, Judge, but we don't like that law, and we're not going to convict him. We've had that happen with alcohol prohibition. It's one of the reasons why that scheme collapsed. We've had it happen now with marijuana prohibition and other drug prohibitions. So the jury said, we don't like that law. We're not going to convict him. So the judge locked up the foreman, Bushnell, and another man, kept him in jail for quite some time. Finally, their lawyer said, show us the law that they violated. Established habeas corpus. And they said, well, there isn't any law. And they let them go. That established jury nullification. Folks, we're not going to get our rights given to us, whether it is free speech or anything else, if we don't value free speech enough to stand up for it. We're never going to have it given to us by a Supreme Court, by politicians, not even by the Constitution, Bill of Rights itself. We created that. God gave us those rights, and we have to stand up for them. Welcome back. I'm David Knight. I think the most important thing I saw in all of the news today is what Tim Allen said. Actually, it came out yesterday afternoon. Who makes up these rules, he said, talking about the takedown of Roseanne Barr. Who makes up these rules? Well, that's a good question, isn't it? I think that ought to go down in history as one of the fundamental questions that everybody should ask. Who makes up these rules? Because, you know, we've had the question asked, a rhetorical question, you know, who watches the watchers, right? That is a question that we should all be asking as we look at the surveillance state. Who watches these people who watch everything that we do? We have all-seeing eyes that look at everything that we do. They are omnipresent. They're omniscient. They're omnipotent. This godlike government that watches everything that we do. Who watches them? And as we have seen, nobody watches them. Nobody watches them. Rand Paul, not too long ago, said somebody needs to surveil the people who are watching us. Yeah, nobody is watching them. But who is making up these rules? Are these rules made up for us by the Supreme Court, by Congress? No. Congress is basically given up writing laws. And we have rules that are made up now by the bureaucracy. And, of course, when the bureaucracy makes up these rules, they pretend that they are not, that the violation of these rules is not a crime. So you don't get the presumption of innocence. You don't get the due process that is specified in the Constitution. You've just violated some rules. So they can do whatever they want. They can confiscate your property. They can confiscate your kids if they want. We'll talk about that later in the program. And then if they do that, you have to sue them in court. That's why they call it civil forfeiture. Yeah, there's nothing civil about a bureaucracy that is out of control and self-interested. We're going to play a clip for you later in the program from an interview that I had yesterday, a man who had his children wrongfully taken from him. It took him 22 months to get his child back, and he learned some very interesting things that he wants you to know about, how big this program is and how self-interested the bureaucracy is in terms of the money that they get out of that. But the question is, who makes up these rules about speech now? Well, there's a lot of people that are making up rules. And we have to ask ourselves as a society, do we want to value freedom of speech, freedom of thought, a free marketplace of ideas? Do we want to value that? Do we want to go back to, as you've heard the quote, of course it wasn't Voltaire who said it. It was a distillation, excuse me, of what Voltaire had said. I may disagree vehemently with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. That is not the case anymore. If somebody disagrees with you, they will try to kill you. That's Antifa, the anti-FA people, the anti-First Amendment people. And that is what we have become in this country now. We have members of the press lobbying to shut down other voices. We saw this, as I said, we've seen it with the political debates for quite some time. We saw it not too long ago in a film festival. There's a documentary called Vaxxed, done by Del Bigtree. I've had him on many times as guest. And it was about whether or not vaccines are harming our children. You don't want to have that discussion? You don't want to understand why autism has gone through the roof? Well, you may not agree with Del Bigtree, but don't you care enough to even have that discussion? No, the other filmmakers demanded that that be taken out of the Tribeca Film Festival. And Robert De Niro said, effing yeah, because, you know, he can't say anything without putting an F in it. This guy who hates Trump so much hates free speech as well. And he bowed to the pressures of his peers. Bowed to the pressures of his peers. So the question is, as Tim Allen said, I've been a comedian for 38 years. I've never seen anything like it. Like Lenny Bruce said at the Purple Onion, we've gone backwards. There's things you can't say. There's things you shouldn't say. Who makes up these rules? Well, I'm pretty sick of it, quite frankly. I'm sick of the censorship of Stitcher. They don't really matter that much, frankly. But we do have these other organizations, these social media oligarchs. I call them anti-social media because they are antisocial. They encourage people not to interact with other human beings, but with that little black mirror in your hand. And so that's antisocial. And then they don't even want you to be able to interact in ways that you want to interact. They're going to control how you interact with people, even on that electronic cyberspace. They're going to tell you how you're going to interact with people. You want to know why Facebook is falling? It's not because of the movements by the European Union to try to look at what they're doing. No, it's not any of that. It's the fact that people are sick and tired of it. They don't want to be told what they can see, what they can share, what they can read. They're not going to be controlled by those people. And one of the things, as he references Lenny Bruce, I remember that movie. I don't remember Lenny Bruce, but I remember the movie. One of the things that they did to him, which we have to make sure we don't do, is to turn inward, to become so obsessed with defending ourselves. And everybody can fall into this. We can fall into that here at InfoWars. You can see President Trump fall into it as he defends himself against these unjust attacks. We have to be so careful, I think, that we do not become self-absorbed, because what Lenny Bruce did as they came after him, it completely destroyed his act. He was so obsessed about defending his freedom to tell jokes, and there's Dustin Hoffman who played that role in the movie, that he denigrated to the point where instead of doing his stand-up comedy routine, he would stand up there and he would read from his court transcripts. And nobody was interested in that. He wasn't telling jokes anymore. He was defending himself. I saw Irwin Schiff do this as they came after him for income tax. I remember seeing him at Libertarian Party conventions. He'd stand on a soapbox and read from his transcripts. And you can get so caught up in the minutia of the personal attacks against you that you're not on point. That's one of the things that they want to do to us. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. So let's take a look at where this whole thing started. And it was with Russia. It was Hillary Clinton, where they started all this thing about saying, the Russians have hacked Hillary Clinton. As the hounds were on the trail of that fox, Hillary Clinton, the people who were trying to protect her came out of the woods with a smelly fish, a red herring, if you will. Okay, that's where the expression comes from. Hey, that's a red herring. Well, they came out with a red herring, and they drug it over the trail of Hillary Clinton, the fox, so that the hounds couldn't find it, so that the other Democrats didn't see what she had done, the dirty tricks that she had done as part of the Democrat primary. And it worked like a charm. The hounds just went off in other directions. They started following the scent of the red herring. And that's where we've been ever since. We got Rand Paul, who's going to visit Russia on Monday to try to promote diplomacy. And I know where this is going to go. He's going to be denounced as a shill for Russia. You know this is predictable, right? You can't talk about this. When we come back, we got to go to break in just a couple of moments here. But when we come back, I'm going to play a clip for you. We had Max Boot, this never-Trumper, CFR, neocon. I could just go down the list with pejoratives for Max Boot. What a shill this guy is. Talking to a real Russian scholar, Professor Stephen Cohen, who has followed U.S.-Russian relations for 45 years. And he knows that for 45 years, we've had presidents meeting between America and Russia, even at the height of the Cold War. It was good to do that. It was good to do that. And as he is saying that, he gets attacked by Max Boot. And he says, how dare you? You are criminal. You're defaming me. He says, I don't do defamation. I do analysis. But you are defaming me. You are trying to criminalize diplomacy as well as détente. You know, I find it very interesting that these liberals who are so afraid of man-made global warming have absolutely no fear of thermonuclear war. As a matter of fact, they're doing everything they can, pulling out all the control rods to try to get us to melt down into a thermonuclear war. Absolutely insane. It is a policy of mad. It's not mutual assured destruction. It's crazy, folks. We'll be right back. I was talking about Rand Paul, the fact that he is risking being identified as a Russian agent. Yes, the people that call themselves control because they think they're in control of everything are going to say that he is on the side of chaos, and yet we know who is on the side of chaos. Rand Paul said he's going to lead a U.S. delegation to Moscow on Monday. He's going to meet the Russian deputy foreign minister. Shame on him for doing something like that. Amid deteriorating relationships between the two countries. His statement said Senator Rand Paul is a proponent of diplomacy and is supporting President Trump in engaging around the world. He looks forward to the meeting. In an op-ed piece for Politico last month, Paul revealed his plans for the trip, said he needs to prevent further unnecessary escalation of tensions. You know what that is if you look that up in the dictionary? It's called détente. Many of you millennials may not remember that word because it was something that There was once upon a time, many of you will remember when we had the word gravitas. All of a sudden, it was never there. And then all of a sudden, one day, everybody on the news media was saying the word gravitas. Gravitas this, gravitas that. This person has gravitas, so forth. It was like it was the word of the day. You know, I used to do that with our kids. You know, we homeschooled them. And so you have these vocabulary builders, and you say, well, okay, kids, the word of the day is anti-disestablishmentarianism. You have to use that 5 times in a sentence or something a little bit more obscure. Usually it's the things that don't have a lot of syllables that are difficult to figure out how you're going to use them. You can kind of break the other ones down. But the word gravitas all of a sudden just came out of nowhere, and then everybody was using it over and over again, that echo chamber of the mainstream media for a couple of days. Same thing happened with détente. It just came out of nowhere. I think maybe Henry Kissinger started talking about détente. And as he did that, it became a commonly used word. It lasted for more than a couple of days, as a matter of fact. And it meant the easing of strained relationships. Now, one person who understands what détente is Professor Stephen Cohen. And he got on, I think it was CNN, with Max Boot, one of the people who I am sure is going to come out and call Rand Paul a Russian, because he did that to Professor Stephen Cohen. Absolutely amazing. I want you to hear this clip, this back and forth between this neocon shill, Max Boot, and somebody who is trying to keep the world from breaking out into nuclear war, Professor Stephen Cohen. Here's that clip.
The striking thing to me is that although he's willing to threaten North Korea, he's willing to threaten Iran, he never threatens Russia. And that's why a lot of intelligence officials think that there is something highly suspect in the relationship between Putin and Trump.
I have no idea what Mr. Boot is talking about. He wants Trump to threaten Russia. Why would we threaten Russia? You've got 2 nuclear superpowers.
Because they're attacking us. And Russia is attacking us, Professor Cohen. Russia is attacking us right now, according to Trump's own director of national intelligence.
Russia, I've been studying Russia for 45 years. I've lived in Russia and I've lived here.
And you've been consistently an apologist for Russia in those 45 years.
Russia hasn't... Excuse me, what did you say to me?
I said you've been consistently an apologist for Russia in those last 45 years.
Oh, you're a Russian apologist then.
All right, I don't do defamation of people. I do serious analysis of serious national security problems. When people like you call people like me, and not only me, but people more eminent than me, apologists for Russia, because we don't agree with your analysis, you are criminalizing diplomacy and détente, and you are the threat to American national security. End of story. Why do you have to defame somebody you don't agree with it? They used to do that in the old Soviet Union. We don't do that here. Well, we used to, but we need to stop it.
Because Max Boot is a military-industrial complex shill. That's why he's on CNN. That's why he's there with Anderson Cooper. And it's not just Max Boot. It'd be fine if it was just him, but there's a lot of people that fall in that category. We've got other senators besides Rand Paul who are in the process of trying to do more punishing of Russia. They don't want to ease strained relations. They want to strain relations between the U.S. and Russia. Zero Hedge points out in the latest effort to punish Moscow over alleged election meddling. Again, they're attacking us. They're meddling with our election. I'm going to talk about that later. We've got the Democrats who are hacking our election in a number of ways, with foreign citizens, by the way, giving them the right to vote and doing it unapologetically. When I first saw this, I said, hey, let's just get it over with. Let's just give Russian citizens the right to vote, okay? Because in San Francisco, they're going to give them the right to vote on school board issues. They're going to have foreign citizens who are going to decide how much money you are going to pay to build schools for them because their country, their home country that they are citizens of, don't want to pay for their education. So they send them here for us to pay for them. And if you look at the number of children, as we had this debate as to what was going on at the border, if you look at the number of children that are intercepted by Border Patrol, that's not counting the ones who get through that they don't know about, but you just look at the ones that are intercepted. That's enough kids that would have to build a school every 2 days at the average size of schools here in Texas. A new school every 2 days, just for the ones that they know about. Who's going to pay for that? You will, with your property taxes. What happens when you pay for the free education of these dreamers who come here demanding free education from you, paid for by your property taxes? That means that your American dream goes away. And so I said, let's just give the Russians a vote, and we can stop all this fear and paranoia, and we can stop rushing up to a nuclear exchange here. Let's just give them the right to, if you're worried about them hacking the election, just give them the right to vote. Well, it turns out a couple of days later, there was a story that came out, a Russian woman in, again, San Francisco, where they gave these people the right to vote. Turns out that she was put on the voting roll in 2012, and she wasn't a citizen then. She became a citizen like 3 years later. And she said, I never even registered to vote. I became a citizen, but I never registered to vote. And I certainly didn't register to vote back in 2012. But, of course, she was put on as a Democrat. So, yeah. But you want to know where the real hacking is coming from? They want to use that term hacking, but then as soon as you say, oh, well, you know, what votes were changed? Where were they changed? Oh, no votes were changed. Don't lose any confidence in the election system. We can trust this election system. Absolutely can trust it. No, you can't. We have DEF CON. The hacker conference that happens in Las Vegas started last Friday. I think it's over now. It might be still going on. They have two different conferences. There's a Black Hat conference, and there's also DEF CON. One runs after the other. But the first thing they were going to do was to set up replicas of the state boards of elections websites and have kids, because they wanted to show how easy it was to hack into the system, have kids hack into this system. Kids that were ranging in age from 5 to 16, just to show how quickly they could do it. And, of course, you know, we always see the pictures. Every election, you have a local TV news station. So I've said before, they take an associate professor to junior college, and he brings in some of his undergrad students, and they have a thumb drive, and they stick it in a computer, and they own that computer. Well, it's far more important if you can hack into the areas where they count and tabulate the votes, and you can change everything there algorithmically. So if you really were concerned about hacking the election, you would do what that one jurisdiction, you had a town that had their computers taken over by ransomware, and they said, we're just shutting the things down, at least till we can get them fixed. We've gone back to paper and typewriters. Well, let's go back to paper ballots, because that's the only way that you're going to keep anybody from hacking the elections. All of this nonsense about the Russians hacking the election, folks, it's because it's going to be a hacking contest unlike anything you have ever seen, unlike even DEF CON. They're going to have the Republicans and the Democrats both hacking our electronic voting system. They don't want you to know this. But if either side gets caught rigging the votes with the electronic voting machines, they're going to blame it on the other political party. We need to go back to paper ballots. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. So let's talk a little bit about the people who are like Max Boot. What are they really up to? As we have Senator Rand Paul saying he's going to go to Russia on Monday to try to ease relationship. It used to be that that was a good thing. It was called détente. But now, as we just saw in that clip from the last segment, somebody like Professor Stephen Cohen, you say it's always been a good thing for the presidents, and every president has done it since Truman, to go and talk to the other people who, between the two countries, as President Trump pointed out in Helsinki, have 90% of the world's nuclear weapons. You don't think we should talk to them? You think that we should threaten them? That insanity that we're rushing forward to? Well, we got senators who want to threaten them. As a matter of fact, Rand Paul is the only one who doesn't want to threaten them, apparently, because we got congressional hawks, as it's reported. Congressional hawks. No, these guys are not hawks. They're chicken hawks. They're warmongers. They're neocons. They're dangerous. People like Senator Bob Menendez, John McCain, Lindsey Graham. And they want to, quote, impose crushing sanctions and other measures against Putin's Russia until he ceases and desists meddling in U.S. elections. I just told you what a crock that is. Absolute nonsense. They want to walk up the fear and hysteria, and then if you actually call them on it, say, well, what actually happened? Well, nothing actually happened, of course. Same thing Rosenstein did as he indicted the Dirty Dozen. He said, well, of course, no Americans violated any laws, and no votes were changed, but let's get afraid of this, okay? You should be afraid of the Americans who are bringing in these electronic voting machines. And we have seen in Texas how they play with the records to make sure that you don't have an accurate recording of how these votes were done. Those are the people who are really hacking with our elections. It's the Republicans and Democrats. But these people are like Lindsey Graham are stepping this up. So they want new restrictions on sectors, they said, ranging from energy and oil projects to uranium imports and sovereign debt transactions. This is why Russia has basically flushed out U.S. currency. They dumped most of their holdings in U.S. currency. And you keep trying to do this kind of stuff, you're going to undermine the status of the dollar as the world's reserve currency. And once you do that, and once the people realize that this particular Federal Reserve note has no close, just like the emperor, then we're going to go the way of Venezuela. You know, what is going on with this? You know, we have David Stockman, who was the director of the Office of Management and Budget under Ronald Reagan. And he pointed out, he said, the new handmaids of the warfare state are the Democrats and the liberal media. They used to oppose the warfare state. So it used to be this tug of war between the Republicans who wanted a warfare state and the Democrats who wanted a welfare state. And they made a truce with Reagan, and they said, all right, I'll vote for your pet projects. You vote for my, I'll vote for your warfare state. You vote for my welfare state, and vice versa. But now we have the Democrats who are pushing this warfare state big time. And as David Stockman said, if you want to know why America is going to hell in a fiscal handbasket, it's because the last vestige of opposition to the warfare state and the fiscal mugging of the military-industrial complex has utterly evaporated because of the delirious Russia-phobia that has overtaken the Democrats and liberal media since they had the daylight shocked out of them in the election. This resulted in a mental derangement that has degenerated into downright hysteria since Helsinki's summit. He says, as a matter of fact, if you look at the budget, go back and look at the last year that the Soviet Union existed. That's right, CNN, the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. Let's give an update to Lindsey Graham as well. Soviet Union fell. This is Russia that we're talking about. As a matter of fact, the Warsaw Pact countries fell. But we still have to have NATO, don't we? Even though we've subsumed most of those Warsaw Pact countries into NATO. But the last year the Soviet Union was around, when they had 55,000 tanks, 9,000 nuclear warheads, we were only spending $550 billion in today's dollars. Now we've got a $700 billion budget for the military. And our increase in the military budget was more than Russia's entire budget. But be afraid of them. Be afraid of them. We know exactly what these people are doing. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm David Knight. We're going to be talking to Will Johnson in just a moment because there's going to be maybe some action happening in Portland. There shouldn't be if we were allowed to exercise our First Amendment in different places. But there's a lot of people who don't like the First Amendment. They don't like free speech being done anymore. They call themselves anti-fascist or anti-FA, anti-FA. I just call them anti-First Amendment. I think that's what the FA stands for because these people are fascist. They have fascist tactics that they use against people to shut down other people's free speech. So we're talking to Will Johnson. We got a lot of InfoWars crew that are going to be there over the weekend reporting live. And we're going to get to Will Johnson in just a moment. Before we do, real quickly, I want to tell you about some of the products that we have at InfoWarsStore.com because that's what funds this operation. That's what keeps us going here. If you want your First Amendment, if you want free speech, folks, like I said, nobody is going to give it to you. You have to be willing to stand up and take it yourself. And part of that is supporting the organizations that are going to give you the news freely and without control from the government. And that would be InfoWars. And here's a couple of specials that we've got right now if you want to take advantage of those because we want to try to make this a win-win situation. We really do appreciate your support. So we take some of our most popular products and we put them on sale. Things like Winter Sun. That's our vitamin D formula. As I've said many times, you know, this time of year, especially here in Texas, it is so hot. I don't get much sun. I've got a convertible. I can't remember the last time I put the top down because it's so hot. So I'm not getting any sun. I get more sun during the winter here in Austin than I do during the summer because I can take the cold, but I can't take this heat. So if you're not getting sun, you need to supplement with vitamin D. It's very important for your immune system, for many other things, and that's what Winter Sun is all about. But I guess we could call it Summer Sun right now. You can get that 40% off. Also, Secret 12, our vitamin B12 formula, is also 40% off. And we have 3 new fish oil products that are targeted with different kinds of formulations for different needs. Take a look at these products. We have Ultimate Fish Oil, Ultimate Krill Oil, and Honor Roll, which is kind of formulated for kids. So take a look at those different products. If you want to try one of those, you can get it now at an introductory price of 25% off, or you can get all 3 of those at 40% off together as a combo pack. Take a look at the products that we have at InfoWarsStore.com. We really do appreciate your support. It's a way that you can support your health and the health of your family at the same time you support free speech. All right, let's go to Will Johnson again. He's going to be in Portland over the weekend. He's founder of Unite America First, And you can find his website at uniteamericafirst.com, surprisingly. And he has been called, here's his honor roll, he has been called a white supremacist by Nancy Pelosi. And I've got a clip of Nancy Pelosi I'm going to play for you later in the program that I think you're really going to get a kick out of. She was actually on Jeopardy, and she didn't have brain freeze. But joining us now is Will Johnson. Thank you for joining us, Will.
Thank you for having me, sir.
Tell us a little bit about your organization there, Unite America First. What is, are you a white supremacist, like Nancy Pelosi says?
According to Nancy Pelosi, I am. I mean, or anyone who actually supports America, supports the president, you're a white supremacist.
Yeah. And, and of course, you're not, for the people listening to us on radio, you're not white, obviously, for people who are watching.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The reason why I think they call everyone that supports the president white supremacists or anything like that is because they want to attack white people. See, right now, they feel that white people are soft targets because they can call all these hateful, despicable names of white people, and white people are just supposed to take it. You're not supposed to say anything. You're not supposed to be a victim. You're not supposed to come out and, complain because they're calling you all of these names, which are not true.
Yeah, yeah. And we saw that with the lady who was Zhang, that has just been hired by the New York Times. And the New York Times is going to stand by their Zhang. I'm not going to stand by their man because they're proud of the fact that she's Asian, she's young, and she's female. And it's okay for her to say the kind of hateful things that she said about white people. I mean, it was just absolutely amazing how many tweets she had. And, of course, she wants to say, well, it was sarcastic, it was a joke. We're not going to see that allowed from Roseanne Barr, however. She does one tweet, even if she didn't realize that Valerie Jarrett was black. No, we're going to take her down. She will cease to exist. We'll purge her out of media, and yet this lady is given a pass by the New York Times. Absolutely amazing.
Exactly. They give all of these liberals, the leftists, Democrats, whatever have you, they give all of them a pass to be completely despicable, to be completely hateful. They all get a pass. Soon as anyone that's a conservative say anything that they consider out of line, they blow it up. They go completely haywire. They say, oh, look, look, look. For example, like when Trump says something, because every now and then Trump will have foot and mouth syndrome on Twitter, which is fine because we all do it. That's why I voted for him, because none of us are perfect. But as soon as we say one thing, they say, look, look, look. As if they see us as we're perfect people until we make a mistake. But see, they can commit crimes, they can tell lies, they can do everything despicable, and then they just give them a pass.
Yeah, yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like the 4chan people who said, hey, I've got an idea for Halloween. You can wear a mask, so you can go around all the different university campuses and you can put up signs that say, it's not okay to be white. And then watch the media freak out about this. Watch the colleges freak out about this and say, or say it's okay to be white, rather. And they're going to say, no, it's not okay to be white. And we understand what that is. And as you said about President Trump, he's going to have his covfefe moments. We all do. We know because he does that, we know that that he's the one who's writing this stuff rather than some professional speechwriter. He's not having anybody ghostwrite his tweets, that's for sure. But your message, I think, when you're talking about Unite America First, I think that's a very important one because when we look at situations, when we look at the way that the NFL has reacted, for example, to police brutality, and I think that they have missed an opportunity here, but it's people who are manipulating them to miss this opportunity. They make this a black and white issue rather than saying, how can we come together? They say, this isn't, get away. This is our thing. This is a black thing. So you can't talk about police brutality. Well, there's a lot of white people who suffer from police brutality as well. And you need to get them on your side. I mean, why would you push away help? And why would you attack the military, which is what they're doing? They're going out and kicking the cat. They're not going to the source of the problem. They're not trying to unite people to solve a problem. I mean, the real problem is a lack of training and the way that, and bad training, I should say, that is coming out of Washington and the way that the police are interacting with other people. So why wouldn't we come together, black and white, and try to change that rather than make this a divide and conquer? And we know why, because they don't want to change that problem.
Right. To answer your original question, the reason why I created Unite America First, because I wanted to unite all Americans. When I first created, I was still in the transition of becoming from a Democrat to a Republican, or actually I went from a Democrat to an independent to a Republican to a conservative. And what I found out is that you cannot unite with people who want to destroy this country. And the left, their goal is to destroy this nation. That's it.
That's right.
They want to destroy it, and they're so upset because Hillary Clinton did not win. They're willing to do anything they can to destroy the president and destroy the people that voted for him. And that is ultimately their goal. So Unite America First is I wanted to unite everybody in America. I know that's a tall order, right?
Yeah.
But I have to try.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have to try.
Well,
but
you know,
when you have these people, they want to destroy all of us. We can't do it when they want to just fight us for stupid reasons.
That's right. That's right. You know, I spoke yesterday to a black gentleman who started an organization, Stop CPS Legally Kidnapping Children. And he's pointing out the fact that they're coming after the middle class. I don't care if you're black or white. Yeah, they're getting more black children than they are white children. But we need to come together and we need to stop that abuse. And he pointed out that what they're trying to do is to destroy the family. When they come after white people, as you're talking about, and saying, well, they're an easy target because we've made them feel guilty about their heritage or their past, it's an effort to try to tear down the foundations of our society, to tear down our traditions of liberty, of free speech, of a free press, and so forth. They want to try to tear down those foundations in the same way that you had Democrat, socialist economists Cloward and Piven say we can destroy the economy of America with a welfare state. When people didn't get on the welfare rolls, they said, well, we can open up the borders and bring people in from outside the country, destroy the economy doing that, and then we can build our socialist utopia, because they have to destroy what is here first. Whether it's the family, whether it is white people, whether it's a border, they have to destroy that first so they can build their socialist utopia. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, filling in for Alex Jones today, and we have on the line with us Will Johnson of Unite America First. He is going to be at the, I guess we call this a situation. It doesn't have to be a riot. I mean, people want to have a prayer rally. Why would you have a group of people who have to get violent about that? Well, because they are fascists. The Antifa people, the so-called anti-fascists, they are fascists. And we saw this happen the first time before they were starting to call themselves anti-fascists. We had a demonstration that was happening that we joined as a common demonstration at the Planned Parenthood office here in Austin. And as some of us here from InfoWars, my wife was there with my daughter. They spit at my daughter, who, as they were driving off in the car, but they showed up as we were holding up signs saying, "Stop the Black Genocide." They showed up with completely black signs, and they would put their signs. They didn't have anything to say. They just didn't want you to say anything. And that's what these people are. They're actually anti-First Amendment. So I want to talk to Will Johnson about this. Of course, Will, you know, we just had the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals say they're going to hear a case coming out of San Jose, because this is the famous thing going back. I think it was June of 2016 as part of a rally that was there. They pushed the Trump supporters out, the police did, out into the arms of the mob. And we have that video that we all saw of that woman who was cornered, and they just kept throwing eggs at her and so forth. Some of the people were beaten that were there. The police pushed them out. There were other exits that they could go out of, but they pushed them out of that door where the mob was. And then one of the police officers said, yeah, we were told that we weren't going to protect you. And so now they're suing them, several of them. And the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has said, yeah, we'll hear that suit. And we've also heard that in Portland, when ICE was afraid of what can happen with mob. We know that mobs are very, very dangerous things, and so they had a mob that was building outside of the ICE offices, the Immigration Control and Enforcement. They called for help from the Portland police, and they refused to come, called multiple times. And so they're doing this to people now. They're refusing to help people that they don't like politically. This is absolutely amazing.
Yes, exactly. You know, when we have rallies, every time we have a pro-Trump, pro-American rally, it's completely peaceful until the left shows up, until Antifa, BAM, BLM, until all of these hateful groups show up. It is 100% peaceful. It only escalates the violence when the left shows up.
That's right.
And the media never talks about that. If the left never shows up to a pro-Trump rally, the media would never have anything to report on because they would ignore us 100%. I had a rally in Sacramento, and we didn't have a single fight there with Antifa and BAM and BLM. The left didn't show up. That's been crazy. The media just talked about it for like 2 minutes, and that was it. It didn't go national news, nothing. So all the Antifa members that's planning on showing up this weekend, be it Portland or Berkeley, if you don't show up, the media won't talk about it. You can just ignore us. But see, they can't do it because they're so filled with hate. They can't do it. Oh, yeah. And see, in Portland, I don't know if you may be a little too young to remember, but there was a song by a group named Public Enemy used to sing this song, 911's a joke in your town. Yeah. That's exactly Portland.
That's right. That's right.
That's exactly Portland. 911's a joke in your town. So
well, as you're saying,
everyone needs to spread that.
There isn't any violence if they don't show up. If they're the only ones, if they're the only side that shows up, there's violence. Therefore, we might conclude that the violence is coming from the people who, whether they are by themselves or they're showing up as a counter-protest, they are the source of violence. And we saw this going back not just to San Jose, but we saw it going back even earlier, going back to Chicago when President Trump went there for a rally. And these people started, they were violent against individuals. They were destroying the cars. They were keying the cars. They were doing other things to the cars that were there. And the response from the media was what I was absolutely amazed at. And they said, well, it's Trump's fault because he came to our territory. And it's like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Came to your territory, so they have a right to mark their territory like a bunch of animals.
Yeah, that you're in America, but you can't go to certain places in America is what they're saying, because this territory in America is ours. Yeah. It's just like when I was standing in front of the cafe in Oakland with the American flag, some thugs showed up trying to hurt us because they didn't like the fact that we were standing there holding the American flag in America. See, this is America. This is the new America, the one that they want to destroy. They cannot stand the fact that we come together and we want to organize and we want to march and we want to rally peacefully.
That's right.
But it's only when they show up. Because you notice every time the left has a rally, you never, ever see conservatives show up throwing rocks, throwing bombs, trying to hit people with sticks. You never see it. Never. Right. And they can't. And then they try to bring up Charlottesville. But you can't talk about Charlottesville because Charlottesville was supposed to be an alt-right rally, right? Charlottesville. But even then, the left showed up, and again, they were the ones that were being violent. If they would have never showed up, none of that would have ever happened. Every single time.
That's right. That's right. There was a lot of violence that had happened before that car drove into the crowd. But the way the media portrays that event, nothing violent happened until that one individual drove through the crowd. That's not to justify what he did. But they want to ignore the provocations and the fighting that had been going on for quite some time before it escalated into that. And that's always the danger. But that's what they want to have happen. They want that kind of escalation, and they don't want to have free speech or the peaceful exercise of free speech. That is the most dangerous thing that we see coming out of all this. But it's not just there. I mean, it's this. To me, Will, the thing that bothers me is as I look at this, there's at least half of the country anymore that doesn't want freedom of speech. They want to violently censor the other side. And that's whether you're talking about a public protest here or whether you're talking about Facebook. They don't have anything to say. They just don't want you to be able to say anything. And this goes for a long time. They've been telling kids at school everything is racist or privilege or whatever. They want to inculcate in them this whole idea of postmodernism where they don't even believe that there is such a thing as truth. So they're not going to have a debate with you about truth. They're not educated about any facts or about any history. They don't even want to. It's just like, this is my point of view, and it's who I am. So everything becomes about identity politics with them.
You're absolutely right. They've been told an explosive lie to the point to where they believe every single thing that comes out of the liberal media, everything. They believe it as if it's true. I mean, not to get into it, but, when you have a young man that puts lipstick and makeup, then all of a sudden he believes it in the head, he's a woman. The left will believe anything that they're telling them.
Yeah.
So, for example, just
but you can't identify as a conservative, right? You can identify. You could identify as a white woman, but not as a conservative.
Exactly. And, you know, just like the pictures that came out with the poor children being locked up in the cages, as soon as it came out that the children were locked up in the cages, those pictures were from under Obama administration. Okay, shut that down. Let's not talk about that anymore. Let's just talk about how the president is separating families. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
See, they push this lie so much that people believe it. And when you tell them the truth, that's when they say the truth hurts, because at that point, the truth does hurt them because they have to hear something that they don't like because they like believing the lie.
Yeah, it's not just the fact that the kids in cages and aluminum foil and everything was under the Obama administration. They had to Photoshop that little toddler who wasn't separated from the mom, but the mom separated the toddler from the father, paid $5,000 or $6,000 to child traffickers, endangered the child and so forth. And the father's like, I would never do that. That's you know, risking my child's life. Thank you so much for joining us, Will Johnson. Welcome back. I'm David Knight. Let's talk a little bit about the cardinal sin that's been revealed last week or so. And of course, I'm talking about the highest ranking official of the Catholic Church in America to ever resign. That would be Cardinal McCarrick, a pedophile. This is something that has been happening in one country after the other. First, we had this several years ago in Ireland. We've had a massive pedophile scandal in Chile. Now Chilean authorities are getting tough on pedophile priests. Beginning the middle of June, there have been 6 raids on offices belonging to the Catholic Church. They've confiscated laptops, documents, files, computers, things like that. In Australia, we've had the number 3 guy in the Vatican, Cardinal Pell, has now gone back to Australia to stand trial on pedophile charges. Why? Because they changed the statute of limitations. The statute of limitations has been the thing that has protected the powerful, because they're typically the ones who are involved in these pedophile rings. It's protected the powerful politicians, powerful church members, and so forth from this type of thing. And of course, McCarrick was a very big fundraiser for the Vatican. And as the information surfaced, the Pope, who had said that he was going to get tough on the pedophiles in the church when he began, but of course he didn't do that. He said, well, you know, I only think it's, I forget what he said, maybe 2% or something like that was some number that he came up with when he talked to a reporter. And if you did the math on that, that would be like 8,000 priests. He didn't do much of anything. And when you have a guy like Cardinal McCarrick, who has been a massive fundraiser, a celebrity cardinal, just wasn't a celibate cardinal. When you have somebody like that get caught, and now this Pope who's going to get tough on pedophiles comes out and says, well, the cardinal will be sentenced to, quote, a life of prayer and penance. Don't come after him for criminal charges. Of course they won't, because we've got a statute of limitations to protect people like this. And so this is kind of the prayer, not prison approach. Now, you'll hear the press talk about this because they're more than happy to talk about corrupt church leaders. They're more than happy to talk about kids being separated from their parents at the border because of immigration enforcement, because we need to know if they really are the parents or if they're child traffickers. What they will not talk about is the hundreds of thousands of American families, middle class and working class people who have their children stolen by CPS without due process. Yesterday, I talked to Dwight Mitchell. This happened to him. He got involved. He started an organization called Stop CPS Legally Kidnapping Kids. I want you to hear what he says about the scope of how big this problem is that the media is completely silent about. Here is Dwight Mitchell, Stop CPS Legally Kidnapping Kids.
My son was misbehaving terribly in Minnesota, and I did what I thought most parents did. I gave him an ordinary bottom spanking, just typical parental discipline.
Yep.
He told the babysitter, who contacted the police. The next thing I know, they had taken all 3 of my children out of my custody.
Wow. Wow. Just for a spanking. And again, no hearing to see whether excessive force was used or did they have a search warrant when they came for the children? How did that happen? Because that's the key part of the way these things typically go down.
Well, what's interesting is as my wife and I were out for dinner, so we weren't even home when this happened. We get a call from the police department telling us to come down to the station, that they have, all of the children, at the police station. And so we go down. I am immediately arrested for malicious punishment of a child and put in jail. My children are taken and put in foster care immediately. I did not have a hearing as I was supposed to do in 72 hours. I had to wait 10 days before I even had my first hearing. At the hearing, there was no evidence. It was just purely social worker allegations and allegations from my former wife. And they took my children and kept the youngest for 5 months and the middle child for 22 months. During that entire time period, I had no contact whatsoever with my middle son.
Wow. Wow. So how did this eventually get resolved? Did they finally have a hearing after 22 months?
I became frustrated with the system. Initially, I was pushing back. I was arguing about my constitutionality and the things that were not taking place. Finally, I had an attorney. I let my attorney go for ineffective counsel. I proceeded pro se. I filed 3 motions with the court. And once the judge heard all of my evidence and saw all of the lies and manipulation that CPS had done over the course of 22 months, my case was dismissed and my son was returned.
You know, it's absolutely amazing to me. What do you think about the fact that the media is constantly talking about separated children at the border, and yet for decades, this kind of abuse has been conducted against American citizens, and they have remained absolutely silent about this? What do you make of the media's silence on CPS abuse? Because we see reports of this all the time given to us, but other press doesn't really talk about it much.
Well, one of the things I found interesting, and the main reason that I started the organization, is that I was trying to go through the legal channels. I was going through the chain of command. I was speaking before the legislature. I went to the Minnesota Task Force for Child Reform. I spoke to a number of senators and representatives, and nothing was happening. Everything was silent. It was as if there was this big, great elephant in the room, and no one was speaking about it. Even when I provided the evidence to the task force, to the police, to the media, everyone refused to speak about it. And I said, understood. I said, I'm going to do something about this. So I formed a parental rights group just to see how many other individuals were having the same issues that I was. Our group went from 250 people to over 3,600 people in less than 90 days.
All right, and he talks about the fact that this is a $2.9 billion industry that is operated by the bureaucracy. That's about $29 billion over the last decade that they've spent. It is in their financial self-interest. But I want you to hear what he had to say about the statistics of what happens to kids that are put into foster care. Again, here's Dwight Mitchell of Stop CPS Legally Kidnapping Kids.
Each year, they release about 25,000 children back into society. They call it aging out of the system. But when we look at the statistics on an annual basis, 55% of the girls in foster care are pregnant before the age of 19.
Wow.
The number of foster children that age out of the system without a high school diploma is 50%. You know, 40% of the foster children who are in foster care are either dead or in jail within 1 year of aging out of the system. 20% of the children are homeless immediately when they age out. Only 3% of the children that are in foster care go to college. 50% are incarcerated within 2 years. 74% of the former foster children are incarcerated. And 80% of the inmates on death row were former foster care children. So what that's saying to me is the people that are in charge of protecting our children and providing for their safety and their education are actually the child abusers, because they're putting them in these situations where they are destined to fail, and there's the outlook and the future is bleak for these children. And as you were saying before, many are sexually abused and assaulted. And just recently, the Children's Defense Fund sent a letter to Congress where 540 healthcare professionals and agencies across the United States said that separating children from their families creates traumatic, lifelong injuries. This is also on my website. There is a wealth of information on the website with direct links to all of the
you can see that entire interview. Real News with David Knight on YouTube while it lasts. You can also find that link on my Twitter account, Libertarian. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
As everyone watching or listening knows, there is a international campaign to create the false consensus that I deserve to be taken off the air and that free speech and the First Amendment need to be removed. And to build this consensus, there is a wall of lies and deception, defamation, fraud. And I'm not going to go through all the permutations for those of you that have already been tuned in and you're already fully aware of it, but it is massive. I'm bullying the Sandy Hook families, children. I'm sending people to their houses. Not true. I'm beating up transgender children. Not true. I'm beating up children. Not true. I mean, it just goes on and on. And they never show what I've actually said or what I've actually done. I guess it was about a year ago, someone drove into a couple of Muslims outside a mosque in England. And so The Guardian and others ran with the headline that myself and Tommy Robinson had caused it because the person had been retweeted by us. Turns out that was 1,000% false. A fake account of Tommy Robinson, a fake account of supposedly mine, had done it after the fact. So that's what the left does. And then they shadow ban you so that the false accounts are on top. And they do the same thing where they say that I say there's a Martian base with slave children. None of that's true. They never show it. So the fake news media is the enemy of the American people, as the president has said. And they go, oh, he says the First Amendment is the enemy. No, he's not calling for getting rid of the First Amendment like the left is and like the EU is. They're the ones that have done it. And then I saw the shocking footage we're going to play here in a moment of Tommy Robinson looking very freaked out, very 1,000-yard stare after being in solitary confinement where the Islamists rain down feces on him daily. We're going to play the video in a minute. It's unbelievable. And it's just very, very haunting to think about how he's been lied about, how he's been deceived. And whenever I'm wanting to have him on or have on, any of his crew, I always get emails and calls. Oh, he's a white supremacist. Don't have him on. Oh, it's discrediting if you have him on. None of that's true. He was never a white supremacist. He was a hero when he was 21, exposing Muslim grooming gangs and massive sexual exploitation that's now been confirmed and real and documented. Just like we confirmed and documented similar things happening here in the U.S., but by corrupt elements of the Catholic Church, Hollywood, and others. Just like we exposed everything else. And that's why we're under attack, and that's why we're lied about. But this tactic where everybody gatekeeps, including on the supposed right wing, oh, don't go on Alex Jones. He's an extremist. You'll get attacked for going on. Well, it's the same thing they do to Trump all day. Don't support Trump. He says all Mexicans are murderers and rapists. Really, show me the video. Show me the audio. It doesn't exist. So that's the game these frauds are playing. And they're the enemy. They're the problem. They're the issue. And we need to just keep hammering that. But now, as I predicted a year ago, because I know how they operate, they're saying there's going to be blood on your hands, Trump. There's going to be blood on your hands, Jones. You're criticizing the media. And when there's a terror attack against the CNN, or there's an attack that happens, it's going to be on your hands. No, it's you, the left, calling for hashtag hunt Republicans and beating up people and shooting them and, saying the guy that shot Congressman Scalise wasn't a bad guy on CNN, Wolf Blitzer's show. You're the ones doing that. You're the ones inciting the country. You're the ones pushing all that, not us. But I'll tell you, CNN just likes to promote the false flags or the staged events or the provocateur events where they let some crazy Prozac head who's saying he's going to kill everybody, they turn him loose in some program because his last name's Cruz. He wasn't even Hispanic. So he's a lot of talking about he's going to kill people for 3-4 years and be involved in all these crimes, and then you let him get wound up and go kill people, and then you try to block my videos exposing that the police stood down, saying I said nobody died at Parkland, which I didn't say. You're frauds, you're liars. So the only problem at CNN and ABC News and all the rest of it is, and MSNBC is, they're not going to want to let some crazy actually attack them. That's why there hadn't been a false flag there yet, because every time there is some type of nutball that wants to do it, they find out about it and stop it, and they should. So the last thing we ever want is violence against the lying, scumbag, fake media, the corporate assassins of truth. But what we do want to do is expose the fact that they're a fraud and look at every card they could play, because they're really building up towards we're the victims, we're the victims, we're the victims, we're the victims. So 2 + 2 = 4. They're getting everybody lined up and getting everybody ready for something big. And everybody can see it because they're getting their butts politically kicked at high noon. Doesn't mean we're going to have a real shootout with them. It means they're getting their butts politically destroyed. And we're non-violently winning, and that's the good news, and that's what is so exciting. All right, we're going to go to break here. David Knight is hosting. As everybody knows, InfoWars is under unprecedented attack because we're over the target. And then we come back from break, we'll have the video of Mr. Robbins on Tucker Carlson breaking all this down. I want to remind folks, it was only Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, myself, Matt Drudge, who would defend Robinson when he was put in jail wrongfully for his speech. And now he's a bigger hero than ever. It's really blown up in their face. He's got to be very, very careful now. He's next level. We've all got to be careful. So do I. So do you. But just remember that everybody else on Fox is saying, take me off the air, and then lying about what I've said. And then going after Tucker and others that have defended my speech. But Ted Cruz gets it. Tucker Carlson gets it. Matt Drudge gets it. If we don't hang together, we'll hang separate. Infowars.com, newswars.com. Next year's news today. Hear it for yourself. Find out what we're actually saying for yourself. Don't just go off the enemy's propaganda, the enemy's garbage. Go off the reality of what we actually say and find out why they fear us so much. Keep spreading the links. Get the free app, Infowars.com/app. But whatever you do, realize this is an information war, and you spreading the word is so critical. And the reason they're afraid of InfoWars is because they're afraid of you.
Tell us what it was like for you behind bars.
For me, behind bars, the way I was treated, I was taken to a prison with quite a low Muslim population. What I'm known for is criticising Islam, so there's been many planned attempts to murder me and kill me in this country. I was taken to a prison with a low Muslim population of 7%, where things were relatively normal. I was separated from other prisoners, but the prison officers made sure they opened my doors multiple times during the day, and they took me out to play pool and snooker with themselves. I was then taken from that prison and transferred to another prison. And I was transferred to the prison with the largest Muslim population in the UK for a CCAT prison. I was then put on solitary confinement, where I spent 2 months not seeing or speaking to anybody, and they used the reason that I was in danger. Now, they would have had risk assessments before I went there. I was purposely taken to be put in danger so that then that reason can be used to then put me on solitary confinement. And if you think about what has happened in this case, it took a number of hours to take me before a court, prosecute me, unlawfully imprison me, and then it took 2 months with the prisons moving me to prevent my legal access, shortening my legal visits, and it took months before I got the opportunity to go before a judge. Once the judge heard what had happened in the trial, we found so many illegal and wrongdoings within this kangaroo court that then it took another 2 weeks before I was freed. And to be honest, this whole encounter, if you talk about, I haven't eaten. I've lost nearly 40 pounds in prison. I had 1 tin of tuna and a piece of fruit a day. I was supposed to be in Her Majesty's prison service, not Guantanamo Bay. I couldn't open my windows because I was having excrement and spit put through them. I believe this whole process, and Tucker, this isn't the first...
I'm sorry to interrupt, but who is putting excrement through your window and spit through your window?
So my prison cell that I was put in was on the lower level, the ground level, which it didn't have to be. So it's on the ground level. So every prisoner would walk past my cell window, everyone as they walk out. So when my windows were open, every prisoner's walking past. The mosque for the prison was directly opposite my cell. So every time, and we've had huge heat waves, I was literally drenched day to day, and I had excrement and spit thrown through the doors, through my windows. So in the end, I had completely blocked up windows, had to block up all of my cell windows. And all of this, when I say this, to a lot of people around the world, this current case, and the world has watched it, has shocked them. For me, this has been nothing new.
Welcome back. I'm David Knight. We're going to be joined in the next segment by a man convicted for hacking a hospital computer network. Well, that sounds pretty serious, doesn't it? Except that what he was doing was not endangering any lives. He hacked in, if in fact he did this, he's been convicted of it. He wanted to bring attention to the medical kidnapping of a young woman who was severely damaged by a hospital. The parents could not get her out of there. She had a real medical condition. They diagnosed it as a psychological condition. So he hacked their fundraiser. And for that, he is now facing multiple years in prison. We're going to be talking to him coming up in the next segment. But to continue with what Alex Jones was talking about in terms of the way that this is all going down, you know, it's kind of interesting to see how there's kind of a circular defamation that's going on here. And I was really disappointed in Matt Taibbi of Rolling Stones. He's done some excellent journalism in the past. I thought this was a real hit piece. At first, I thought he was on to something, but then he went off the rails. The title of the article was "Beware the Slippery Slope of Facebook Censorship." Yes, that's right. And as he gets to it at the very end, he says, when Facebook works with the government and with wannabe star chamber organizations like the Atlantic Council to delete sites on national security grounds or using secret methodology, it opens the door to nightmare possibilities that you'll only find in dystopian novels. Well, he's absolutely right about that. And he talks about the organization, this Atlantic Council. You know, this is a group that was helped with this. Get that clip of Michael Hayden. Well, no, I don't think we have time for it. This is a short segment. But he's who's on the Atlantic Council that's helping Facebook? And of course, they're also being helped by the Southern Poverty Law Center, who encouraged a man to grab a gun and try to go in the Family Research Council and kill people because he was told by the Southern Poverty Law Center that if you believed in traditional marriage that has been defined by all societies throughout civilization and history, but also held still by Christians, that if you believe that marriage is between one man and one woman, that is hateful speech. And so he went there to kill people because he was sent there by the Southern Poverty Law Center, yet the Southern Poverty Law Center doesn't get any criticisms. Matter of fact, they're still being used by the FBI. So what is this Atlantic Council? It's got people like Henry Kissinger. It's got former CIA chief Michael Hayden. Of course, he was also the NSA chief. Matt forgot that. Here's what he had to say about why they're really spying on everybody. Here's Michael Hayden.
This is not about guilt. In fact, let me be really clear, okay? NSA doesn't just listen to bad people. NSA listens to interesting people.
Oh, yeah, isn't that right? Isn't that cool? And then people, the lawyers that he's talking to, they're the prospective lawyers at Washington and Lee University. Thought that was funny. Yeah, we're not interested in bad people. We're interested in interesting people, you know, like President Trump or like Alex Jones, InfoWars, want to shut them down. And so even Matt Taibbi is looking at this and he goes, well, you know, you got people like Henry Kissinger, people like that guy, Michael Hayden, former, acting CIA head Michael Morale at the time, a former Bush-era Homeland Security chief, Michael Chertoff, the guy who was behind all the scanners and so forth, and all that scam with the underwear bomber. Anyway, he points out 70% of Americans get their news from just two sources, Facebook and Google. That's a point where they can control the narrative, where they can nudge people. That's why he wants to know. You may not be interesting to Michael Hayden as an individual, but you are interesting to him as a collective group. They want to know if their narrative is working, and they want to choke it off if it isn't working. And so he goes, so that brings us over to InfoWars lunatic Alex Jones. And he goes on to defame Alex Jones by saying things like, Jones had 4 videos removed from YouTube and his Facebook page, and he was banned and so forth and so on. But he found a way to get around it more or less instantly. You know what, Matt? You're a better journalist than this. Why don't you bother to even look at these videos to see if there was anything there, to see if it was reasonable or not? No, you just want to defame Alex Jones. You don't care if there were lies spread. You don't care if the Washington Post or the New York Times are lying about Al. You reference those without doing any research of your own, and then you wring your hands over it. You know what? We have to really be concerned when the journalists are begging for censorship. Welcome back. I'm David Knight. We have calling us from prison, Marty Gottesfeld, and we've talked to his wife, and Marty has written many articles for InfoWars as well in the past. As the New American pointed out, he was the hacker who cared too much. He cared about a young woman, Justina Peltier, who was kidnapped by Boston Children's Hospital. He's been in prison for quite some time over charges that he hacked into their computer system. He was found guilty of that this week. I wanted to give Marty a chance to talk about this and what is ahead of, because the sentencing is not going to happen until November. But joining us now is Marty Gottesfeld. Thank you for joining us, Marty, and I'm sorry to hear about how this came out in court.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for your concern. I'm actually feeling pretty good about it. We have some very solid appellate grounds to move forward. The Speedy Trial Act was violated here quite clearly. The judges who have been involved with this, I think, is one of the more interesting aspects of this story. The magistrate judge who signed off on the search warrant for my home, her name is Magistrate Marianne B. Bowler. She actually worked at Harvard Medical School before embarking on her legal career. She was a research assistant there. Harvard Medical School oversees and is the primary affiliate, or the only teaching affiliate of Boston Children's Hospital. And Boston Children's Hospital is the largest pediatric teaching facility for Harvard Medical School.
So it looks like she has a conflict of interest here, then, is what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and there's many. The fact that she worked there and was a research assistant is just one. Her husband also still to this day works there and is a paid practitioner at another Harvard hospital, which was referred to in the FBI's affidavit in support of the search warrant. And that is interesting, too, because the date on the front of that affidavit, which I'm theoretically not allowed to publish, says September 30th, 2014. And yet the date on the front of the warrant, which Magistrate Bowler approved, she handwrites September 29th, the day before. So we have a mismatch of dates where it appears she approved the warrant before the FBI even applied for it. And then,
well, that's interesting because this prosecutor here that was involved in your case was Carmen Ortiz, isn't it?
She was the U.S. attorney at the outset of the case.
Okay.
She was an Obama appointee.
Yeah, and she was involved in the case of Aaron Swartz that many people might remember. She was the one who tried to send Aaron Swartz to jail for decades for something that was a very minor, grabbing some data off of a computer. It wasn't any kind of damage done to the computer whatsoever, but she tried to send him to jail for decades, and that was politically motivated. He was somebody who was trying to stop CISPA and had done so.
Yeah, Aaron did a lot of really important work, and he was fighting again for the taxpayers in this instance, where the taxpayers had actually paid for this data that he was trying to make available to the taxpayers when someone else had found a way to kind of hoard this data away from the taxpayers. And Carmen Ortiz didn't like that. And kind of the scuttlebutt around the IT water cooler is that they were really paying him back for the CISPA work and work he had done for WikiLeaks and things like that. And so they weren't really prosecuting him for the actual charges. They were prosecuting him for other political activity, which they didn't like, is at least what many people believe.
Now, what you were convicted of was getting into a computer system at the time of a fundraiser. This kind of revolves around the case of Justina Peltier. Tell people a little bit about that particular case and the alleged medical kidnapping, because this was not the first time that Boston Children's Hospital had faced allegations of medical kidnapping.
Oh, no, it's a pattern that has gone back at least 20 years, has been documented by a former state social services worker who this actually almost happened to 20 years before Justina was at Boston Children's Hospital. And this state social services worker, her son had the same condition that Justina had, and the hospital tried the same thing. Thankfully, in that case, she actually knew the state social services people, so they didn't end up taking her son from her, but she spoke out around the time of what was happening to Justina. So Justina has mitochondrial disease. This is a very real, very serious condition that affects how the individual cells in the body produce chemical energy from food. The mitochondria are the part of the cell that actually break down food into chemical energy. And mitochondrial disease is a set of conditions. No two cases are the same. Where those mitochondria have a hard time producing the chemical energy that the body needs to run. And because it's an umbrella with many different types of mutations and genetic anomalies that can actually cause this incompatibility between this part of the cell and the rest of the body. No two cases present the same, although there are kind of trends. And so Justina had many of the common symptoms, and she had been on medication for them. She had been diagnosed with mitochondrial disease by a foremost expert. He was, at the time, the chief of metabolic genetics at the Tufts University Medical Center, which is a renowned hospital, one of the many that we have in Boston that just so happens to not be affiliated with Harvard. And she had caught the flu. And the flu is known to cause serious complications for mito patients, especially when it makes them nauseous and causes them to have a hard time eating and keeping down food, which is what had happened to Justina. So you have her body already in a compromised state where it has a hard time producing the chemical energy that it needs to run. And now she's got the flu, and she's having a harder time eating, a harder time keeping food down, and so it greatly compounds the condition. And so she was slurring her speech, and she was having some trouble walking, which is wholly different than the way she ends up. One of the very confusing points here is around her wheelchair, and I'll clarify that in a minute. But she still had feeling below her legs at this point. Like if you touched her knee, she would feel it. And her parents called Dr. Corson, the Tufts specialist who had diagnosed her, who had diagnosed her older sister with this genetic condition that often runs in families. And so it wasn't just Justina. One of her older sisters had the condition as well. And Dr. Corson wants Justina to see her gastroenterologist, a man who had worked with her before, who had operated on her before, and who had just moved from Tufts Medical Center to Boston Children's Hospital. And Dr. Corson himself had actually worked at Boston Children's Hospital for over a decade before moving to Tufts to seek greater autonomy.
Marty, I'm going to interrupt you here because we got to go to a break, and I want you to talk about what's coming up in your particular case. But just to summarize this for people, she had seen and been diagnosed by a recognized authority at Tufts University. She was being treated. She was still able to lead an active life as a competitive ice skater and so forth. As she went there for flu, they diagnosed her with a psychological treatment. Her parents were not allowed to remove her. That's where the medical kidnapping comes in. This went on for a long time. It was picked up by a lot of media. Mainstream media was picking this up as well. But the way they spun this situation and the way that they have spun this with you is to say, and I'm looking at the Boston paper, man convicted for hacking a hospital computer network. It makes it look like you're endangering people's lives. No, the person's life that was endangered was Justina, even if you had done this. And so I guess as we look at this and you go to appeal, what is ahead for you now, and how can people help you? Because we've just got about a minute left.
Okay, so we're going to be filing an appeal up to the First Circuit on speedy trial and suppression grounds. More stuff came out about Bowler, the magistrate judge, showing that she shouldn't have stayed on this case. People can help by going to freemartyg.com, following us on social media. We always appreciate donations. I'd also like to ask the White House to take a look at this situation and the corruption at play here with the judiciary, with this hospital, with law enforcement who didn't investigate what happened to Justina at all, didn't investigate civil rights violations when her family was put under a gag order and not allowed to talk to the press, when they weren't allowed to get a second opinion, when Corson wasn't allowed to see her. And I think those are the big things that could really help a lot.
Yeah, and when we look at this, I mean, it's the same type of thing that we see over and over again, whether it is Ross Ulbricht or whether it is the Bundys or the Hammonds or Marty Gottesfeld. We have a broken judiciary. And that's why the president needs to get involved in this. Not only just pardoning people who are victims of this, but we need to have some real systemic reform here that is not happening. We've got a bureaucracy that is out of control, ignoring the requirements for search warrants, not giving people their due process, not giving people speedy trials. It is a severely broken system. And Marty is unfortunately just the latest victim of this. Thank you for joining us, Marty. And again, Free Marty G is where you can get information about him, freemartyg.com. And I hope you learn more about Marty. Maybe you can help him. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. I'm David Knight. Joining us in the next segment will be Mark Morano, the producer of ClimateDepot.com. I guess you could call him a producer. He's done documentary films, but that's also his website. He's going to be joining us to talk about the New York Times' biggest lie that they've just come out with. You know, do they ever get called for their lies and conspiracy theories about climate change? As I said before, these people on the left that are so freaked out about something that we've got good evidence is not happening, don't worry at all about trying to create a thermonuclear war. Yes, that would be, children, that would be man-made global warming on a large scale. So we're going to be talking to Marc Morano coming up. Before we get into some information about sex bots and Terminator robots here, because this is something, folks, that we hear the back and forth going on all the time. Some people poo-poo it. Mark Cuban says, well, you're an idiot if you don't think that this is a threat. I'll tell you why I think it's a threat, and I'll tell you something about the time frame of why I think this is a threat in just a second. But before we do, real quickly, I want to tell you about some of the products that we have at InfoWarsStore.com, because if you want to support this program, if you want to keep us going, the way you do that is with the products that we sell at InfoWarsStore.com, and you can also support your health and the health of your family. We've got several specials right now you can take advantage of. We have Winter Sun, that's our vitamin D formula. That is 40% off. Secret 12, our vitamin B12 formula, that is also 40% off. We've got some new fish oil products. They're slightly different formulations. We've got 3 different versions. Ultimate Fish Oil, Ultimate Krill Oil, and Honor Roll, which has some special formulations in there for children. You can try those individually at 25% off each, or you can get the combo of all 3 of those for 40% off. Finally, I'll tell you about a special we have on our Real News program, since we had that on rebroadcast this morning, since I'm doing the guest host here. We have a 20% off sale for people if you want to get the Wake Up America Patriot Blend coffee. That is 100% non-GMO and Arabica bean coffee. And you can get 20% off of that if you use the code REALNEWS, because that's where I usually am. I'm usually there. You'll find me in the mornings at 8 to 11 Central Time, 9 to noon Eastern Time. And we have that show live every Monday through Friday. That's Real News. And you can use that code REALNEWS to save 20% on Wake Up America Patriot Blend coffee at InfoWarsStore.com. Many other products that are there, very important for your health and very important for the health of this operation. And that's one of the things, as I looked at this Matt Taibbi story, one of the things that bothered me so much about that, as I said, is the fact that he would do the sloppy job. This is what he had to say, you know, InfoWars lunatic Alex Jones had 4 videos removed from YouTube. Well, Matt, why don't you look at those videos? You can see them. We've got them at InfoWars. Just because they're not on YouTube doesn't mean that you can't see these things. But you're going to take the word of YouTube, and you're going to take the word of the New York Times and Washington Post, even though they would be lying about Alex, because he references back to a New York Times story where they say the videos removed included one called Prevent Liberalism, in which a man chokes a child and throws him to the ground. That is the most ridiculous representation. Well, it's the second most ridiculous representation of that video. There's a kid reported that he had been keying cars or whatever, but he's basically hitting on this man. The man tries to get up, and the kid's pushing and shoving him. Finally, the guy just turns around and shoves him to the ground. And the kid, it's not anything very violent against the kid. The kid was hitting him and pushing him, wouldn't go away. And this goes on for quite some time. Finally, he shoves him to the ground. The kid just collapses and whines. And so it's like, you know, it's a snowflake video. It's a nothing video, really, quite frankly. But it's not a man choking a child and throwing him to the ground. And yet, the most ridiculous story of that is Forbes magazine. Forbes said Alex Jones was the man. What are we going to do when the software to make fake videos becomes very easy, where you can put somebody's face? It's obviously not Alex. It doesn't look anything at all like Alex. And yet he's having to now defend himself against charges of child endangerment, having to defend himself against his ex-wife, who's using this fake news from Forbes magazine, from YouTube, from the New York Times, from Matt Taibbi at Rolling Stone, all of them making false accusations that it was Alex Jones who did this stuff. And it was a video of a man choking a child and throwing him to the ground. I was like, why would we put that up if that were the case? Another one, shock report, learn how Islam has already conquered Europe. Well, you know, look at the videos and see if you don't think that Islam has already conquered Europe. I mean, you know, can we have that discussion? Oh, we're not allowed to have that discussion. We use the word Islam. Shut us down because you hate. Well, we have gone so far away from the fundamental values that we have come to uphold in Western civilization, that even if we disagree with what you have to say, we will defend it to the death. You know, that is the thing that really concerns me. It isn't what's being done by these self-interested media moguls, the sloppy journalists like Matt Taibbi, who are slandering and defaming people. That's not what bothers me. It's the fact that as a society, we now despise the idea of free speech, because free speech means that you uphold the free speech of people that you don't agree with, because other people who don't agree with you are going to censor you. But now we're all begging the government, begging these guardians of information that have been created by the government. And that was where he basically gets. But he blames InfoWars for the coming censorship instead of blaming the Atlantic Council, or instead of blaming DARPA, or instead of blaming the LifeLog, which they renamed Facebook. Oh, don't look at those connections. Don't look at that at all, Matt Tiabi. And as a matter of fact, don't even bother, don't bother to look at how and why we've got YouTube and Google and the internet created by DARPA. It was a psychiatrist that was working at DARPA that came up with the idea for the intergalactic computer network that we call the internet. Yeah, it was a tool of psychological control from the beginning. Maybe you don't understand that because you can't even be bothered to do enough research to look at the videos. You just pass along the defamation charges. Absolutely amazing. Folks, we are in a situation where, as we've talked many times, when the elite look at this, are they going to have a soft kill for us, or are they going to do it with hard kill? Well, I think they're going to, they're well on the way with both of these. You know, we look at the stories that have been floating around for the last couple of weeks, Japanese extinction, because men don't need women, they're told, anymore. And they don't want women because women have been taught to hate men and be hateful toward men. That's the programming that the women get. Then the men say, oh, it's just too much of trouble. I'll go get a sex doll. And then, of course, the babies don't need mothers because now we can create the babies from stem cells. It's full-on Brave New World, folks. It's really, really sad to see what is happening with. I guess as we go on with this, they're even going to replace diplomats, you know. I don't know if that's the oldest profession or the second oldest profession. But they don't even need politicians because the AI is now going to be making China's foreign policy. You know, as I look at this, Mark Cuban is saying, if you don't think a Terminator will appear, you're crazy. He said, we've already got weapons who think. And if you don't realize where this is headed with technological progress, you don't really understand what is coming on. You know, if you want to understand what's coming on, I'm going to be speaking at a conference that's coming up September the 14th. I'm going to be the keynote speaker on Friday night. It's a weekend conference. You can find tickets at gen6.com. We're going to have Dr. Hugo de Garis, who's talked about the art-elect war. I've had him on many times. About transhumanism. That's the essence of the conference. Post-humanism. What do they aspire to, these people who make God out of technology? And we're also going to have Steve Quayle, Tim Alberino, Tom Horn are going to be key speakers at that. You can get 10% off of the streaming with code ALEX. That's ALEX. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and joining us now is Mark Morano of ClimateDepot.com. You know, we've had Jerry Brown making headlines everywhere, saying that this heat is the worst since civilization emerged 10,000 years ago. Well, you know, his pants may be on fire, but the planet is not on fire. You know, there's some bad fires in California. We'll probably find out that they were arson. We typically do with these types of things. And as New American and others have pointed out, if you take the hysteria side, no, that's not the truth. But there's a great article at ClimateDepot.com where Mark Morano lays out the lies of the people who are pushing this climate change stuff. You know, they love to, he begins with a quote from George Orwell in his article. Early in life, said George Orwell, I noticed that no event is ever correctly reported in a newspaper. And then, of course, George Orwell invented the memory hole that they flushed the information down. They would love to flush down the idea that they were first trying to panic everybody with global cooling, then it became global warming, then that didn't work either, so they went to climate change and so forth. And he breaks down the lies of the New York Times itself, but they are never called, are they, Mark? They're never called on their lies or on their conspiracy theories. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Actually, I just want to say one thing. Jerry Brown saying it's as hot since civilization began. Well, then civilization would have began about 10 years ago because meteorologist Joe Bastardi said California was hotter 10 years ago. So this is the height of just insanity, but the media runs with it and he's getting all the attention.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You've got a great, after that quote with, it's a great article. That's why I wanted to get you on. After that, you talk about the New York Times in January 1989. And I've had many times on the show, I've had it was Newsweek and it was Time Magazine at the time. And, of course, they were, totally objective. And they were telling everybody we're going to be out of oil, we're going to be out of natural gas by the mid-1980s. I mean, that was the other thing that they were trying to panic everybody about at the time, because they were using that to justify massive growth in government in various ways, with the EPA taking on a bigger role and shutting down entire industries and so forth. So they had their agenda to push those kind of absurd lies. I knew as a college student that that was nonsense, so I preserved those magazines, Mark, because I've been showing them on air. I never knew that I would be on air to show magazines like that, but I knew they would be collector's items. But you've got some great collections of what the New York Times said in 1989. Tell us about it.
Yeah, well, first of all, the article is actually by Tony Heller, and it's posted on my article, my piece. And I also did a whole chapter on this very issue in my book, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Climate Change. But what the New York Times did in this article, they went back to the 1980s. First of all, my first accusation is this is medieval witchcraft. They're saying that had we passed laws and adopted UN treaties back in the 1980s, we could have solved global warming. That is literally the scientific equivalent of saying, had we burned those witches, put them on trial, and shut them down, we could have saved those crops and stopped that bad weather. That's the first premise.
I should have brought you in with the thing from Camelot, right? There should be a law that, July and August shall not be too hot, and then it'll exit June the 2nd on the dot, or whatever the lyrics are to that. I should have brought that in, because that's basically what they're saying. If the king would have only stopped this, we could have had a great climate if they would have passed a law.
They're serious. They believe it. And so you go back to 1989 at the Climate Depot. You can read this. The New York Times completely 89. The New York Times completely contradicted everything in this article. In the 1980s, the New York Times was reporting that scientists weren't in agreement. They were reporting that there had been a cooling trend since the 1930s in the United States. In the 1970s, in my book, I detail that they had arguments between climatologists and meteorologists about whether global cooling or global warming was to work about. Actually, their own paper is a repository of global cooling predictions from the 1950s into the 60s and the 70s. So there's no way they can whitewash this history and claim that A, we all knew the science and it was settled back in the 1980s, and B, only if we had done something we could have solved this. The most outrageous lie of this article is they cite a 1974 CIA report as evidence and proof that we all knew about global warming. Well, the 1974 CIA report, which they didn't actually reproduce the quotes from, was about global cooling, and it called it natural global cooling, and was warning of the coming ice age, and it was warning of crop failures and bad weather to come, blamed on global cooling. And the New York Times has the ball. I mean, I actually have my headline, will they issue a retraction on this? And David, you know the answer to that. No. They will never issue a retraction, no matter how wrong they are.
And so now we learned that all 17 intelligence agencies also believed there was global cooling, and that we were also had hit peak oil, right? So we had all of these different things.
Peak oil, we had overpopulation, we had famines, we had resource scarcity. And we had all of our rivers and air all being choked off, which all of that has been unbelievably improved with increased economic growth and population. We still have improved our air. Everything they predicted in the 1970s has gone belly up, is the bottom line. But the New York Times is now whitewashing the history to say, we've known all along, and if only we had passed these laws, we would have solved this problem. And then what? Had we solved the problem, they'd be on to some new wacky problem we have to be dealing with today.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing to me when we look at these big name publications, like the New York Times or the National Geographic, of course. That was the other thing that hit this week. The fact that National Geographic finally came clean about the picture of the dying polar bear. Yes, polar bears do die in the wild. It's not just in captivity, and it's not just from unicorn farts that they die. They actually do die from natural causes. And so the National Geographic photographer has come out and said, okay, it wasn't really due to climate change. We just said that it was something, this is what this could look like in the future and so forth. We're just making a suggestion here, kind of like the little 9-year-old boy who suggested that, just made up a figure for plastic straw use. And so now we got plastic straw bans all over the place, and people going to, possibly facing jail sentences.
More plastic, we're harming disabled people. Disabled advocates are very upset because the straws they need to use are for mobility issues. Straws have been very good, and this is what happens. What you just mentioned there, National Geographic. they're not really, they're admitting that the whole thing was a fraud and all that in their own indirect way, but they're not really apologizing. What they're saying is, well, we gave the photo and other people ran with it and implied all sorts of things. We were just trying to say this. That is, in fact, that photo of the sick polar bear, here's the shocker. If anything, we are at or near historic population highs, according to the U.S. government, number one. Even the environmental activists say there are more polar bears than we've ever counted. If you see a sick, thin, dying polar bear, it is very likely due to too many polar bears trying to get it in too small of a habitat. It's overpopulation of polar bears that would cause that. I have a section in my book on the polar bear scare. Not only is the polar bear scare scientifically unfounded, even the climate activists have now walked away from it. Al Gore's sequel, no mention of polar bears. The World Wildlife Fund, this used to be the poster child of all the environmental groups. They've all faded away because even indigenous people in the Canadian Arctic now admit and basically have always said that there is no issue with the polar bear. They're plentiful and they don't see any concern. So the environs have been forced and shamed to back off. And this photo controversy was a big part of it too. I mean, this was a fraudulent photo that they promoted as part of global warming, and it had nothing to do with it.
So this polar bear ain't hunting anymore, right? This dog don't hunt.
Animals die. I mean, it would be like getting a sick American and saying, this is how all Americans live. Look at this. The government is allowing people to die. I mean, that's about the scientific and social, scientific validity of that one picture of a polar bear.
But, you know, the thing that Mark, that really bothers me about all this, and we're seeing it again now. It's like, well, we have a narrative, whether it is about Russia or whether it's a narrative about President Trump or whatever. And if you say anything else to contrary to that, you are fake news. You need to be taken out. And we've just seen this arrogance that we saw with Jim Acosta, shouting over other journalists, shouting over the press secretary, Sarah Sanders, and everything, saying, listen, you pledge your fealty to me. Don't you criticize media because I represent media. These are people like National Geographic, New York Times. They put their lies out there. They have absolutely no responsibility. They're not held accountable as they lie to things. But don't you ever disagree with them because they have a conventional wisdom. And if you go against that, you will be vilified. You'll be shut down. You'll be taken out of the media. We've seen this same type of action taken against people talking about the environment. All right, stay with us. We got to take a break. We'll be right back with Mark Morano. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Mark Morano of ClimateDepot.com. We're going to get back to him in just one moment. Before we do, real quickly, just remind you of the specials that we've got at InfoWarsStore.com. That's what funds this program, keeps us going in spite of all the attempts to shut us down. And we've got some specials for those of you who support the program, and we really do appreciate and need your support. Winter Sun, our vitamin D formula, is now 40% off. So is our Secret 12, our vitamin B12 formula, 40% off. We have 3 new fish oil products, the Ultimate Fish Oil, Ultimate Krill Oil, and Honor Roll. They're different formulations, slightly different. Like Honor Roll, for example, is formulated for children. It's got some special things in there. Take a look at Infowars.com. Sorry, I say Real News. We don't have our own site there for selling products. No, it's Infowars.com. Honor Roll, you can read about that as well as the others. You can get them 25% off, or you can get all 3 of them together at 40% off. We really do appreciate your support. You can find that at InfoWarsStore.com. Also, as we talk about Mark Morano, he's got a book out, Politically Incorrect Guide to Climate Change. And you know what? When we talk about climate change, if you do not repeat the talking points, you are politically incorrect. And they have, for the longest time, tried to ban people. Mark's got a video that's got 6 million views. And, of course, there's a push by the anti-free speech, anti-First Amendment, the Antifa fascists, if you will, these people who don't like an opinion that differs from their own. And we're seeing this everywhere. It's amazing how authoritarian the left has gotten. I mean, they used to be out there. Remember when it used to really mean something and people used to say, hey, this got banned in Boston, you know, for sexual content or something like that. Now they want to ban everything in Boston and everywhere else that the liberals live. And so if you have a difference in opinion on science or on politics or anything else, now you've got more than half of the country that wants to shut you down. You've got 6 million views. You've got a lot of people that are lobbying Facebook to shut you down because of a video. Tell us a little bit about that video.
Yeah, I mean, remember the old days, Lenny Bruce got in all that controversy for using a few bad words, and that became, oh, horror of horrors. And now it's like they want to shut everything down. here's what's going on. My video, which is on Facebook, I was interviewed by the Heritage Foundation, a 2-minute video for my book, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Climate Change, garnered over 6.3 million views, 100,000 plus shares. The Soros-funded Media Matters for America, Grist Magazine, a few other publications are livid about this. They're calling the video viral, and they're saying that Facebook has a denial problem, a climate denial problem. It is so deep. They're using me now as the poster child. They're using me to lobby Mark Zuckerberg directly and Facebook to ban climate denial ads, videos, news feeds of any kind that don't accept the Al Gore United Nations climate summation. And they've gone so far. I was named Media Matters Climate Misinformer of the Year a few years back. It was actually a great dishonor on my part, and Al Gore even touted that I won this award. Well, they've now given that same award that they issued to me to Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook. He has now received the Climate Misinformer of the Year for 2017. This is part of the pressure that the Soros-funded groups are putting on Zuckerberg. And Zuckerberg supports the UN Paris Agreement, is your typical liberal climate alarmist who has no disagreement with any of this, and he's being called a misinformer. So the pressure is on Zuckerberg, the pressure is on Facebook. I'm now the poster child, the viral poster child that they're just outraged. And by the way, my video specifically, David, deals with a chapter in my book about the alleged 97% of scientists. And this is what really galls them. I point out that it was only 77 anonymous scientists. We don't know their names. We don't know what universities they work for. This is one of the ways that they claimed a 97% scientific consensus. So I think they're mad it's getting that attention because the truth always hurts this whole cause of man-made global warming.
Well, the thing that really sent them over the edge was also when Scott Pruitt said, you're not going to have any regulations published if you don't show the data for your science. You know, you're not just going to have to wave your hands and you can't hide all this stuff. You're going to have to put it out there like you would if you were a real scientist, you know? I mean, that's the way it works. And I was involved with a group that tried to get the data from Michael Mann because we had all these emails that were going back and forth as part of ClimateGate saying, we've got to hide the decline. This isn't working out. Our models aren't good and all this sort of thing. So it's like, well, show us your data because you've now published this stuff. There's no reason to keep it secret. You've now used this to create policy. So show us the data. And when Scott Pruitt said, yeah, you're going to have to show us the data, that's when it really became a problem for them. They don't want to have science discussed. They don't want to have anything that has to do with reality or politics or science discussed. And of course, all advances in science have always come from overturning the conventional wisdom. That's why they don't want to have this discussed, and it's also the money that they make out of this, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I met the old EPA director, Scott Pruitt, who essentially was ridden out of town because of the media attacks, and he lasted unbelievably long. It was the most effective EPA administrator in the EPA's history. I always say, as much as the left and media hated him, he was the greatest EPA administrator we had. Yeah. I met with him at an event, and I showed him all the data, and it's actually in my book, about how the U.S. government is basing their climate decisions on the United Nations climate science, which violates the basic standards set out by the U.S. government for not being political interference of science. The UN science violates that. And for being manipulated, the UN science violates that. So let's hope that this government under Trump and the new EPA administrator, the acting administrator, Andrew Wheeler, can actually look at the underpinnings of this science which we're basing our entire energy policy on. Because the greatest fear here is, as great as Trump is going in and deregulating and reversing this, essentially this can all be undone if a President Biden, a President Elizabeth Warren, or if some other president comes in 2020. We need to change structurally how the U.S. government, like you mentioned, the secret science, and unfortunately that's a long haul. We really do need 2 terms, and of course, if the Democrats win this fall and they win both houses, we are going to have probably Trump impeached and removed from office. That's going to be a hard one to stop. However,
Mark, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on and to talk about this kind of censorship is because when we talk about politics or other things, that involves a lot of people's values. It can involve their religious values or their ethics or whatever. So you can have some things enter that are subjective. But when you talk about climate change or we talk about science, that is objective. And we don't have to get caught up in all this subjectivism, all this post-modernism and so forth that they're taught in colleges. And if you realize that they don't want to have this debate, if they want to silence people and not have a scientific debate, then you start to realize that maybe on these other issues, they don't have a leg to stand on, and that's why they want to silence everybody. That is really the essence of the censorship, and we've seen this going on. You guys are kind of, I guess, the people who are climate, I really think they were the ones who were the tip of the spear on this for the longest, that particular issue, because that was so much money, so much political power tied up in that, and it was something that can be objectively determined, and they don't want to have that debate, that discussion.
No, they don't know. We opened the show talking about the New York Times. Literally, the New York Times' own paper archives debunk this entire new 2018 article. And they always say, oh, we knew it. Also, inadvertently and unexpectedly, the New York Times got rid of the Exxon New mandate. So they have a lot of climate activists after them for this article. They're getting attacked on all sides. But as you mentioned, David, the biggest thing is just simple factual stuff. When people realize that they can distort science, and I'm talking bald-faced lies, reversing the 1974 CA report to imply global warming when it was clearly global cooling, to imply that there was a consensus of any kind in the 1980s when their own paper reported dissenting scientists and no warming trend since the 1930s before they altered the data later. There's no way you can read these rebuttals to the New York Times article, which, by the way, was a 30,000-word article. And the New York Times was so proud of this article, they invited in environmental activists the night before with the New York Times publisher to have a big cocktail party and talk about it. You want to talk about collusion? Yeah. The media colluding with climate activists and environmental groups. This is what's happening behind the scenes. But luckily, it's a partisan paper, and only the people that, in the echo chamber are going to read that paper. It has no real impact on America, middle America. It only affects that elite ruling class cocktail party activists. And that's where we've won that battle. And I think that's one of the greatest achievements. We can end that on a positive note, is that their reporting largely is irrelevant when you have particularly a President Trump who's awesomely calls them the fake news, and just ridicules him at every turn, which is exact. I waited my lifetime.
Except that you have
for president to ridicule, and we finally have it, and it's awesome.
That's right. That's right. That's an appropriate response to the New York Times. Except that's not the response that we see. We see that Facebook and all these. Oh yes, we're going to enshrine CNN and the New York Times that we've just been talking about, and the Washington Post and so forth. We're going to enshrine them as the gold standard of journalism. We don't want to have this discussion. They can't be fake news, and if you oppose them, you oppose the media in general. And yet, I mean, this really all boils down to the fact that these guys are getting, just in the UK, $2,000 a day as consultants on on this climate change stuff. The UK alone has spent $12 billion in about 7 years on this kind. Big money there, and big lies coming out of that. And you can see that stuff exposed at Climate Depot. Thank you so much for joining us, Mark Morano. And of course, you can find him on Twitter, also at Climate Depot. That's it for today's broadcast with me, but stay with us. We're going to have Nick Begic is going to come on, and he's going to be hosting the 4th hour.
And welcome back to Infowars.com. This is Nick Begic, and I'm filling in this last hour for Alex. And, just to pick up where the last guest, Mark, left off on climate change, a couple weeks ago, I did a segment on this, quite contrarian as well, regarding what's really going on with climate change. And, take a look at some of those older segments. One good thing about Alex, one of the things I really appreciate about InfoWars is keeping that material alive under subtitles. So take a look at that, because there are some other issues that I think are also driving what we're seeing. But these are natural cycles predominantly. I think as time goes on and as people get honest with the science, we'll see a very different picture. Science has almost become religion, if you think about it. It's what does religion come from? Root words, which mean to regulate belief. Man, is science about that or not? I mean, these days, it seems so much so. Political correct science, no room for it. And as it was said in the last segment, anytime there's been a major change, it has always started with a few that disagreed with the status quo. Science is no exception. I even think about continental drift, you know, the whole idea of how geologic processes work. You know, in the 1960s, this was so controversial, was thrown out. The guy was laughed out of every circle, and now it's mainstream. In fact, it's probably what's driving most of what we see in climate change, undersea volcanics, these kinds of issues, which I've covered in the past. But jumping into this segment, I want to give, again, a little bit of background on myself for those that haven't heard me before. I've been working with Alex since his very early days when he was in his 20s. We began working together, and I have taken always a bit of a contrarian view, and I appreciate disruptors, which is what I consider myself, what I consider Alex, and many of us in this fight for freedom, freedom of the press, being able to express ourselves freely. In fact, you know, many know my family background. My dad was a state senator, later a U.S. congressman. My brother, Mark, was a mayor, and then eventually a U.S. senator, running for governor now in Alaska. And my brother Tom is a seated state senator. I've run a couple of times, but I really decided this is a better role for me, addressing the issues I do care about in a public forum. But in my family, one of the highlights, one of the main emphasis was to think, to use your mind, combine it with your inner self, your soul, and push yourself into your passions. And in my family, we have a lot of debate, I mean, about politics. It goes from the ultra-liberal to the ultra-conservative in my family. When we get together at social events, and we just did this last weekend with my mom in town, we have some pretty lively debates. But when we part as family. And this is the model I believe the country needs right now. We need to recognize that in America, we are a family. We're a family of common interests, very different ideas about how to achieve those interests. But the respect that family brings is the same respect that we should expect from our fellow citizens. And now on the left, we see the violence. I mean, the idea of protesters, counter-protesters showing up in face masks, covered faces, hiding their identities. This is not discourse. This is not dialogue. This is just the opposite. What breeds contention, what breeds disaster in the long run. We're coming up into a break. Pay attention to the break. This is how the network supports itself. This is Dr. Nick Begich, and you're listening to InfoWars. And welcome back. This is Dr. Nick Begich, and I just want to mention one of the specials going on. It's called Winter Sun, 40% off on Winter Sun, and this is a vitamin D supplement. I want to mention, you know, even though it says Winter Sun, we're still into the throes of summer. Most of us work in indoor environments. You know, we don't get the sunlight that we need. Winter sun is important all the time. You know, you can go and see D deficiencies across the spectrum in almost every community, whether you're living in Hawaii or whether you're living in Alaska. You know, right now we are in the peak of our sunlight cycle, but so many people today don't get out of the cubicle. Winter sun, utilize it, use it. This is one of the major deficiencies leading to all kinds of dysfunction. So check it out. Winter Sun, 40% off. Take a look and support this program by supporting the products that make this possible. You know, getting back into this idea of thinking again and discourse in terms of the public, you know, for me, the search of truth began pretty early in age. And I can tell you, when I was growing up, here in Alaska, and then later moving to Washington, D.C. with my family when Dad was in the Congress. Because in those days, actually, families moved with congressmen. They didn't fly back and forth on the weekends. We were there. We were engaged. And, you know, there was a very different culture because of that. Because, in fact, I spoke with my mother about this recently. You know, Democrats and Republicans, they would get together in social events. They would involve our families, and it would keep us focused on what we were about. And there wasn't this division, this separation. It was really an integration of philosophies and ideas that led to vigorous debate, lots of conversation, and certainly with all the emotional energy that you would expect. But at the end of the day, respectfully, resulting in decent legislation that was put through the normal processes. Today, it's about resist, 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 never concede a point. This is not the America I grew up in, and not the America we want for the next generation. The idea of thinking on your own and thinking outside of the box. My brother Tom once said to me, was reiterating a story. You know, my brother, he thinks out of the box. Let me say this, and I said this to Tom. If you think there's a box, you're still in it. And it's the way you perceive the world, you know, looking at information, taking information, and not just from mainstream media, because it has shifted dramatically. It is not freedom of the press intended to keep us informed anymore. What it's really intended to do is push public opinion in very specific directions. And this is a very dangerous place. When you think about Google and Facebook, 84% of all global ad revenue on the internet goes to just those two players. Let me say it again. 84% of all media advertising on the internet is to those two places, Google and Facebook. These are owned by liberals. Think about the biggest companies in the world, Apple Computer, essentially up until the founder's death, liberals. Gates, when you look at Bill Gates and his foundations, liberals. When you look at the biggest organizations that are driving media and public opinion, it's liberals. The dominance of these two players, Google and Facebook, needs to be addressed because they are a utility. The internet needs to be regulated like a utility in the sense of making sure all opinions are permitted. There should be no screening. Short of yelling fire in a movie theater, free speech is about expressing contradictory ideas and bringing out discussion. You know, and hate speech, I mean, come on. What is hate speech? It has been with us since the dawn of man, if you want to give it a title. But what it is speech you don't agree with. That's essentially what it is. It's like a conspiracy. You know, it's when two people get in a room and they're talking about something you don't agree with. You call it a conspiracy. This is not the kind of thing that leads to good public policy or the kinds of changes that all of us are looking for within government, which means transparency. A lot of my work over the last 25 years has been about privacy, the digital changes that are coming, and it goes all the way back to 40 years ago. And when I was in my late teens, my theme in those days, this is taking it back to the 70s, this was over 40 years ago, and I looked at three things: information, transportation, and communication systems. Think about that since the late 70s and what our society has come to. You know, when you look at those three ingredients to change, and now you look at information systems, and you look at communication systems, and you look at the way the majority of the population gets their news, again, from those same two players, Google and Facebook. This is a fundamental change that is altering everything about everything. And these two institutions want to be the gatekeepers of speech in the world. This is dangerous. This is extremely dangerous. In fact, I would say the amount of power these organizations represent now is, in fact, not just a monopoly power for economic reasons, but more fundamentally a monopoly power on information. When you look at the mainstream slide, because people don't believe the mainstream, it was much before anyone came up with the phrase fake news, for goodness sake. People didn't trust the media for a very, very long time. I mean, the only group held in a lower esteem was the U.S. Congress, right? With popularity ratings hovering below 10% even. And you know, when you start to think about the American public wants good information, wants accurate reporting, and we're just not getting it from the mainstream. Alternative media is the only media that's left alive, and they're trying to squash this. And where that leads me is into the current conversation, going into these midterm elections, just 12 weeks away, we are seeing the shutdown, the manipulation of conservative voices by these two major media players. Fundamentally, they're going to have a bigger impact on what happens in these elections by withholding speech, by limiting free speech. This is a fundamental change, a big difference from where we were. You know, freedom of the press wasn't about just saying whatever you wanted. It was about invigorating the public debate. This is what is critical to the American way of life, is a public debate that's lively and emotional for sure, but also remains respectful. You know, when I look back on my own history, my biggest change and the biggest thing that impacted me in life was the disappearance of my father, who was on a plane flying from Anchorage to Juneau in the middle of a campaign, disappeared off the radar screens, and was lost with the majority leader of the U.S. House. Some of you remember this story. Hale Boggs was on board. This was right before, weeks before elections, the second election of Richard Nixon, and a critical point in our history. That's when Watergate began. That's when all of the Pentagon Papers were being released. I mean, huge disclosures were being made about the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower had warned against, that Kennedy was looking at when he was talking about secret societies in the deep state. All of these things were coming to a huge crescendo in our country, and major players were snuffed out at a time that most people needed the reassurance of this republic holding together. Today, we're seeing a repeat of the same kind of situations, only these elections are going to be the critical elections that shape democracy for the next decade. We have to pay attention. If the right doesn't stand up and recognize the left is the biggest barrier to free speech. Stay tuned. We're going to be back in a few moments. This is Dr. Nick Begich with InfoWars. And welcome back to the Alex Jones Show, Infowars.com. This is Nick Begich. I'm substituting this afternoon. And, you know, we've been on regularly 2 to 4 times a month for about an hour to talk about various issues. And when we left off on the last segment, talking again about sort of the discourse of how things go and the idea of free speech and what Alex is facing right now. You know, the price of public service is extraordinarily high. People don't realize how much you take when you step up and step out of the normal framework. And this is why I so appreciate Alex and InfoWars. Is it takes courage to step up and do the things that are required of him every day. And I thank his family also, because their sacrifice, it's a shared sacrifice. I know I was raised in a family of public servants. And, you know, it's tough to balance all of those things. And right now, Alex needs help. And he needs help in a lot of different ways to support the litigation that he's engaged with. This is a classical way of shutting people down. You know, when my dad was just starting out in the state Senate, in fact, he was running for the state Senate. We were living at the time on a military reservation on a base. He was a superintendent of schools at 26 years old. He was running for the Senate. He had 4 children at that time. And what happened is a new base commander came on. We lost our base housing. My dad was making $6,000 a year in the Senate, $18,000 a year in the 1960s as a superintendent. And then there was a lawsuit launched by those politically opposed to him, and they tried to crush him economically. And at the end of the day, it was found that he couldn't hold both positions: the state Senate at $6,000 a year and the superintendent at $18,000. And we had just lost our housing. So what did he do? A bunch of friends of his got together. My dad learned how to become a builder, and he built a 5-plex, 4 bedrooms on one side, place for us, and 4 one-bedroom apartments on the other. And no bank would touch him. The bankers launched a lawsuit against him. And my dad had to quit one of those positions. He quit the superintendent's job and stayed with the one that didn't pay much of anything. And we made it. And he stayed with it. this is the kind of situation Alex is in right now. The elites are coming against him. Globalists are coming against him. We need to back up, take stock that it is now. Alex needs to fight these suits, win these suits, and then countersue them to create the disincentive for people doing this again. Freedom of speech requires commitment, and the kind of commitment that Alex has displayed is something all of us need to respect and jump into and do something. Donate to those causes. Jump into this fight, and let's make a difference so Alex continues to have the voice that speaks to the hearts of many people across the world today. You know, the last couple of years, I struggle with a lot of this. You know, the whole idea of what should I do? How should I use my voice in serving the public? And really, I brought it down to a couple things. You know, I do this program. This is a volunteer effort. I do it because I care. And I think there's issues that need to be articulated. And I believe that Alex needs the intellectual support of people like me that come into this with the same commitment as he does, to dissect the information, bring the issues forward, and present the facts so people, so that you and I can make the kind of decisions that reshape our government and reshape our country. When you think about the Facebook, the Googles, and how information is manipulated, these are, you can call them digital drugs, if you will. The idea that they create a feedback loop where you're always going back to get re-stimulated. They're specifically designed to do that, to keep pulling you back in, so that you're getting the directed data feed that your profile presents. You know, they're attacking people for using big media for this purpose. And you know what? The reality is, this is the whole business model for Facebook and Google, is to isolate who you are, what you believe, and what you're likely to do, and then to be able to feed you just those bits of information that support that opinion so that you'll do what the mainstream would like you to do. It's the herding, the digital dictatorship, if you will, the herding through the digital drugs created by these media giants. And yet, none of that is really discussed except for the little flashes in the news. They show it and then it disappears. You never hear about it again. But the behavior continues. What Zuckerberg should be doing is defending the right of free speech, not shutting down sites, but telling his viewers and subscribers that freedom of the press and freedom of speech is foundational to what democracies and democratic republics like ours require for the kind of discourse that leads to great, wonderful, fantastic public policy. This has been our tradition. In America, you know, when you go back over 200 years, we had our problems. We keep changing, growing as a country as we become more aware and a greater recognition of what we are as human beings. When you think about the deep state, it was warned about. It was warned about by Eisenhower in talking about the military-industrial complex. It was warned about by Kennedy. And, you know, the Kennedy brothers, they were a formidable team that came into the game to be the disruptors of the early 1960s. And they were. They were about to change everything about everything. Kennedy wanted to bring the currency away from the Fed back to the Treasury. Maybe that was the thing that got him killed. He was attacking the deep state and secret societies that he believed, rightly so, were manipulating what was going on within the public. And what happened? They took him out, and they later took his brother out. And, you know, and I lectured at one point in Istanbul with Robert Kennedy Jr. I went to school in McLean, Virginia, for a year while I was in high school there with John Kennedy Jr., who, if you remember, disappeared also on a plane. You know, these are people that were considered liberals at that time, but they were a very, very different kind of player. It was about working people then. It wasn't about all these fringe ideas that the Democrats have adopted in the last 20, 30 years. It was a very different situation. It was pretty simple, actually. Republicans represented business in those days, and Democrats represented working people. That was kind of it. And now it's quite convoluted, and it's more the establishment and the not establishment. And it doesn't matter whether you're R or a D, they represent establishment factions. It's time for a change. It's time for us to wake up. InfoWars presents us an opportunity to do that, and we need to do that. We need to get back to our basic principles of what freedom means, and that means discourse that's respectable. We're going to be back in a few minutes. We have some commercial breaks coming up. Think about all this. This is Infowars.com, and this is Dr. Nick Begich sitting in for Alex Jones. And welcome back to Infowars. This is Dr. Nick Begich sitting in for Alex Jones. You know, just before the break, I was starting to talk a little bit about the deep state and kind of how that is looked at one time by one of the pinnacles of the Democratic Party, John F. Kennedy, who saw it clearly. He spoke against secret societies. He spoke against the Central Intelligence Agency. He was very disturbed by Hoover's FBI. These agencies had become, from his perspective, corrupted and vested with way too much power. I think he was absolutely correct. And it's the same thing that Trump is facing today. It just happens to be on the other end of the political spectrum. This is why it is so important for us to be engaged. These institutions that are meant to protect America have become the instrument of felonies. Think about it. They bribe people all over the world. I mean, you don't ever hear about Pakistan. You know, we bribe everybody in Pakistan because they're an Islamic country with nuclear weapons. People forget this. You know, people just flat forget it. We're talking about Korea, you talk about Iran, and the one big miss is this country, Pakistan. And when you look at Pakistan and what has happened there, this is going to shift. There is a big risk in what's happening in that part of the world. It's largely ignored. When you think about the CIA as an institution, you know, George Bush Sr. used to be ambassador to China. Many people forget that. He was also the director, the top guy in the Central Intelligence Agency before he became president of the United States. But you don't hear anybody really talking about that. They talk about Putin being involved in the KGB. He was a low-level operator. He was, you know, I mean, a low-level operator. Certainly he was involved in that. There's no doubt. I read his unauthorized biography, which is very revealing. It's The Man Without a Face, it's called, and I recommend it. Go read it. But when you look at Putin, what is he interested in? He's interested in doing business. He's not interested in a war or beginning of another Cold War. You know, the Russians have essentially one foreign base. It's in Syria. The United States has 850 bases and stations around the world. You know, take a look at the balance of the debate that you see in the public, and all of this is ignored. When you think of the Central Intelligence Agency, they kidnap people, they torture people, they bribe people, they blackmail people, they extort from people. These are all felonies. And this agency is supposed to represent us as Americans, reflecting our values in the world, and I would suggest that they don't. They are in need of reform. The FBI, going back to the days of Hoover, was absolutely corrupt. You know, my mom and I recently got in a big debate about the FBI, and her position was, I trust the FBI, given the current scenario. And mine was, I don't trust them at all. And the reason I don't trust them is it took 20 years after my dad's disappearance for the FBI to produce, under Freedom of Information Act requests, the fact that my father's plane had been located. They had a solid location on it, that the source of that information was confirmed as valid, and yet nobody ever went to pick up the two survivors. Nothing has ever been recovered from that plane crash. And, you know, if that can happen to the majority leader of the U.S. House and a congressman from Alaska, this can happen to anyone. And this is why I'm still in this fight. because I believe in a democratic republic, because I believe in an invigorated debate, and I believe that the power of government flows from the people and up and not the other way around. We need to flip the equation back to a government by the people, for the people, and of the people, instead of a government for corporations, by globalists, for the interest of the elite. This is what needs to change. This will bring us back into a framework where we can see the changes. The deep state, the secret societies that Kennedy spoke about, that we hear Trump speaking about, are the same. The difference is we're winning this time. We're pushing it back this time. Trump has, despite everything, he has a higher popularity rating right now than Obama had at the same point in his first term. People aren't even talking about this. He's holding a 50% popularity rating right now. This is fantastic, in my view, considering what he's been up against with respect to big media. When you think about big media in terms of what they control, CNN is dropping like a rock. Fox is dropping. All of these so-called mainstreams, right and left, are dropping because everyone is feeling like we're getting the packaged, programmed news, the digital download to affect how you think and how you see the world. The reality is we need to think again. We need to turn the cameras another direction. You know, everybody talks about personal privacy. You know, the price of public service is you give up your personal privacy. It's unfortunate. It's one of the realities. When you're in elective office, you have to live a transparent life because that's one of the requirements. But here's what needs to happen. The cameras need to turn the other direction. There should be a camera in every government office that doesn't deal with health care or personnel issues, all right? We ought to be able to look in to our congressional offices. We ought to be able to look into the bureaucracy and see what's going on. And as parents, we ought to be able to dial up with today's technology and watch the classroom in the background while we're at work where our kids are being educated. You know, you could code that so parents have that access. And you know what? Little Johnny, when he's misbehaving and gets home, might have a few new lessons to learn. And a teacher who's delivering propaganda or behaving in a way that's inappropriate might have a few lessons to learn. But transparency in government is what's required now. We have the technology to deliver that. Why aren't we doing that? Because government, the deep state, that layer below, I'll tell you how it operates, how bureaucrats function. Politicians come in and bureaucracy stay forever, 30, 40-year careers. They just wait. And when they make their presentations, they talk about their dog and pony show to convince the politicals that what they're doing is right. And then when they get someone they don't like in there, they just kind of hold back a little bit, and they know that sooner or later they're out and the new one's in. This is how the system behaves. That's why when Trump came in, he started peeling layers off of that bureaucracy, getting to the level first of appointed positions and then dropping down below that to those that are career, lifelong shapers of government. And to remove them from those powerful positions and replace them with others. This is part of the process and part of the draining of the swamp that needs to take place in Washington. When you talk about the migration of all this and how people have been digitized into just little bits of information flying through the internet, think about your records, your grocery store purchases, your credit card purchases, all of your governmental files, military records, all of it is consolidated somewhere by government. And of course, they can't use that information until they get some warrants. And we know how those are done now in FISA courts where nobody gets to be heard, secret courts. Whoa, secret courts. Think about this, folks. Under the guise of safety and security, we watch our civil liberties be peeled away one slice at a time. And where are the liberals now on freedom of speech and freedom of expression and the ideas enshrined in a constitutional form of government and in a Bill of Rights that establishes a very different culture in America, one that we should be proud of as Americans. Change the game. You're listening to InfoWars, where we change the game. Join this revolution and support Alex Jones. This is Dr. Nick Begich. We'll be back in a few minutes. And welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. This is Dr. Nick Begich sitting in this last hour. And you know, when we were breaking off talking about, you know, sort of where is it all going? And we're into the last segment of the day, and I want to talk a little bit. I know Rand Paul is headed off to Russia with some of his colleagues next week. I think that's extremely important. When I think of Rand Paul and what he has brought to the public discussion, we need more people like him. You know, one of his biggest issues has been the Federal Reserve System, and I want to talk a little bit about that because many people don't know this. My brother, when he was in the U.S. Senate, was one of the few Democrats, maybe the only Democrat that supported a full audit of the Federal Reserve because, you know, after all, what's wrong with an audit? And, you know, Ben Bernanke was head of it. The institution called him on the phone screaming bloody murder to my brother. We internally audit all the time, blah, blah, blah. And my brother's reaction was, well, then you ought not to be afraid of an external audit. And he hung up on him. You know, the Federal Reserve goes back over 100 years. You know, you go back to 1894, there was a U.S. Supreme Court decision that said income tax, taxing our labor, was illegal. It was equated to slavery, and it was illegal based upon what had happened in the Civil War, involuntary servitude to the government is essentially, and we drew our income as a nation from tariffs primarily. It was kind of the equalization. Every country basically got their money from tariffs, from trade tariffs. We got the income tax in, and when it came in, it was defeated in 1894 by the U.S. Supreme Court. 1909, they initiated the constitutional amendment that in 1913, 75% of the states ratified, and we got the income tax. But when the income tax began, it was 1% on everything over $22,000. In 1913, the vast majority of Americans did not make $22,000. That was an enormous sum of money. To put it in perspective, gold was $20 an ounce then. This is even before $35 gold. So put that in perspective. $22,000 was an incredible sum. And so 1% on $22,000, and it graduated up to 6% if you made $500,000, which was like unbelievable amount of money. And that's where it started. And look where it is today. The top rate's over 30%, meaning that we are slaves to the government, if you're in that tax category, 30% of the time. We're working for them. We're working for those ideals that aren't necessarily our own anymore. You know, when you think about taxing labor and you think about the Federal Reserve, and Rand Paul is again correct, when you do a full audit on the Federal Reserve and see who has really been manipulating our economy, manipulating the debt, manipulating every aspect of our lives on the economic front, then you have a much, much different picture. That audit needs to happen. You know, there was a partial audit done a few years ago where they showed that during the 2008 meltdown, you know, everybody was complaining about bailing out U.S. bankers for $1 trillion. The Fed bailed out global bankers to the tune of $16 trillion. Go look up the audit, look it up online, you know, look up Federal Reserve audit, look on about page, I think it's page 130 if I recall correctly, and I usually recall correctly. You'll find the breakdown of how much money was flowed out by the Fed, and a lot of it at zero interest. Zero interest, ladies and gentlemen. Who's going to pay that loan back on time, man? You're going to stretch that out as long as you can because it costs you nothing. when you start to think about Federal Reserve and how that lack of transparency, this is the biggest economic engine, the biggest factor in our lives. It is not a governmental agency. It's 300 bankers deciding the destiny of this nation and indirectly the destiny of the world. Bankers deciding how our economies go and from there how our governments go. Because collapsing economies lead to collapsing governments, in case you didn't notice. When you look at the strategy of international bankers and the International Monetary Fund, what do? They go into a country, they saddle them with debt, their economy collapses because they can't pay the interest on the debt, and then the vultures, the corporations that are also the friends of the International Monetary Fund, they come in, they buy up state assets, oil companies, utilities, they make roads into toll roads for a few cents on the dollar, monetize it, and literally rape the wealth of nations. This is the strategy, and this is why these organizations are being resisted. When you look at the case of Ecuador, and I know there's a petition right now through InfoWars for Assange, sign that petition. You know, the only government that would protect him was little bitty Ecuador. And now they've got a change in government, so they have a change in ideas. But think about Ecuador. They're one of the few governments outside the United States that use U.S. currency. They don't have a local currency in Ecuador or in Panama, for that matter, as independent countries. They use the U.S. dollar. Why do they use the U.S. dollar? They use the U.S. dollar because when they were at a war with Peru in 2000 and lost it, their economy tanked. And they used it as an interim, and the public has never, in 18 years, has never let them go back. That's why the United States government could not blackmail Ecuador into giving up Assange during the Obama administration. And the reason they couldn't is a normal way you'd attack a small country is you'd go in and you'd manipulate their currency. So you'd crush their economy. Well, you can't manipulate a government's currency when they're using the U.S. dollar. So they couldn't exert the influence. When the World Bank came to them and say, hey, we want half of your tax receipts to pay off your debt, the former president said in Ecuador, sorry, we're not giving it to you. You can have 20%. We're going to invest the rest in our infrastructure. And their infrastructure was education first, healthcare second, roads, sewers, water, and so on, in that order. And I've traveled extensively through Ecuador. And everywhere you go, you see universities geared to training a workforce. 1, 2, 4-year programs scattered throughout the country. You see healthcare second to none. I mean, they rate so much higher than the U.S. Look it up on Bloomberg. Look it up on the World Health Organization, and you'll see Ecuador in the 20s in terms of efficiency and quality of care, and the U.S. the worst. Here in Alaska, the highest insurance premiums and the highest medical costs in the world. And the quality, I can tell you, is not nearly as good as what you get elsewhere. But when you think about infrastructure, when you think about how the U.S. leverages our power to push other countries, you know, everybody talks about Russian interference. Well, during the Obama administration, the head of Israel, Netanyahu, comes to the United States, addresses a joint Congress, the Senate and the House, undermining our national policy as it relates to Iran, and no one blinks. Obama goes over to Great Britain, lecturing against Brexit, interfering with their electoral process, which certainly have everything to do with Europe and very little to do with us. Nobody says a word. We interfere with every election in the world as a matter of course, and not covertly only, overtly in every way. And if we don't like the outcome, we engage in the political correct phrase, regime change, which is just another word for undeclared war and the ultimate in manipulation of an election outcome. We just go in and boot the leadership and start over. You know, we're in the last minute of this segment. I'm going to remind people of a couple things. Check out my website at earthpulse.com. There's a lot of things there, a lot of information there, and we always appreciate your support. Again, earthpulse.com. And also take a look at the products right here at InfoWars. You know, one of the really good ones, Secret 12, the B12, top notch in conjunction with Winter Sun. These two synergistically work great together. Support this network. Support the work of Alex Jones. Continue in the revolution. Let's take our country back. This is Dr. Nick Begich for InfoWars. Thanks for being here, and we appreciate your support.
We're breaking the conditioning!
InfoWars comes to mind.
Alex Jones.
Alex Jones. Alex Jones.
There's a lot of controversy around this network about Alex Jones.
Google is being accused of hiding negative stories about Hillary and her campaign by changing its algorithm to bury stories like the Clinton body count story. That's according to website InfoWars.
It sounds like it's confirmed there are at least 2 shooters with fully automatic weapons.
Dr. Martin Luther King has been shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee.
JFK was shot from the back and the front.
It was almost as if it were a planned implosion. It just pancaked.
They took the babies out of incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor.
I think this is a national security imperative. We have clear things that we do not understand how they work, operating in areas that we can't control.
UFOs.
Is this global governance at last? Is it one world, the central bankers in charge?
Israel claims the attack was accidental, but some former U.S. naval officers say it was on purpose. They describe the day's action as part of a continuing cover-up.
Russian intelligence compiled a dossier on Mr. Trump during visits to Moscow.
Russian scum!
Denied everything. He called it all fake news.
And he accused CNN of being fake news.
This is a national emergency.
If they kill Trump or remove Trump, it will cause a massive civil war in this country.
This is a FEMA high-level alert.
We are at war with Russia.
Are you aware that Mr. Stone also stated publicly that he was in direct communication with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks?
The White House and the President are citing InfoWars.
If they can shut us down, you're next.
If you are receiving this transmission, you are the resistance. It's Alex Jones.
You know, President Trump talks about how we need to be trailblazers, how we need to be outsiders, how we need to expose the current stagnant system that's been suppressing us, wanting to make us poor so he can consolidate control and buy us up for pennies on the dollar. That really is the globalist system. And he's absolutely right. So it is an honor to be persecuted by the globalists, and to be lied about and to be demonized. But it's an honor to draw them out so we can show who they are, so that you take action and you take the country back politically, culturally, spiritually, financially. Another hero is Julian Assange, who's been in solitary confinement in a closet-sized room. They converted a closet with a bed and enough room for a laptop. They took that away over a year ago. No communication with the outside. It's all been one hell of a time for him, and he was very bipartisan in that he exposed Republicans, he exposed Democrats. He very judiciously released information that exposed criminal activity of the NSA, criminal activity of the CIA, illegal spying on Congress, illegal spying on Trump, illegal spying on me. But they had my home number, my old cell, my new cell, and my office line. And they had Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago private apartment number that I had. Total proof of Obama spying on Trump and yours truly a decade ago. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the real deal. And America's had freedom so long, people don't recognize real tyranny when it hits them right between the eyes. But everyone needs to go to Infowars.com. The article is right up there at the top of the page, red link. Petition to Trump, pardon Julian Assange. And we go over the fact that he engaged in regular journalistic activity and did a wonderful job being advised by top journalism professors around the world, and that he was very, very fair about what he did, and that you need to send the message that he's a hero. Now, I know they claim he's a Russian agent with no evidence and all the rest of that garbage, even though they've released stuff on Russia and Israel as well, and China. But it doesn't matter. It's the right thing to do. And you wouldn't have gotten elected without Drudge. You wouldn't have gotten elected without what you've done, obviously. You can't say it's any one person, but without any of us together, it wouldn't have happened. So we need the president to pardon Julian Assange. And you said in a speech, I don't care who got her illegal server. It's illegal. It's about what she did that's wrong. Don't change the subject. Go back to that instinct, sir. But you told Assange, release it. You said release more stuff. And he's in the crosshairs. and he needs to be pardoned if he's brought back to the United States. Look at that. Everybody else is just like yellow or clear. That's because it's been denatured, it's been watered down. We didn't do that. You think I would metaphysically sell you something that is the very best I can get? I'd rather go to hell than do that. I will only give you the maximum best info, the maximum truth, the maximum product, because I want that goodwill. What I do to you, I do to myself. Don't you get the big secret? You ever seen fish oil look like that? No, you never seen that, have you? And this little jewel right here is solid, liquid consciousness. Look it up. Find out how even the FDA and the government admits fish oil is incredible. The number one thing anybody can do for themselves is take good fish oil or krill oil. Just like our information is dynamite, so are our products, InfoWarsStore.com.